Literally every single thing, every single event, every single relationship, every single conversation down to the finest, most minute detail in the modern Halo canon all leads back to one thing: Halo. The Halos themselves were a defining creation of the Forerunners and the reason they are no longer inhabiting our galaxy. Since they no longer inhabit our galaxy, they left behind marvels of technology. Alien races across the stars came to revere them as gods. Since they revered them as gods, they formed an alliance known as the Covenant, starting with just 2 races, but over time becoming the most dominant empire in the galaxy. Halo ended the ancient era of the galaxy, and in the modern era, the Halo Array has been a gun pointed at the head of the entire galaxy. But not all Halos are created equally. For example, did you know that the galaxy has seen 20 Halos? And that's just the full-scale Halos. There are smaller Halos like the ones we see in the Shadow of Intent novella. So this video is all about Halo. I know that's sort of funny to say coming from a Halo lore channel, but Halos themselves. We're going to go over the inner workings and their structure, why they're livable, and the history and events of each one. The structure of this video is split up by the array. So first we're going to go over the Senescent Array. These are the Halos built by the Greater Ark. We'll go over the Ark itself. Then we'll go over the Halo Array as a whole, sort of just the technology that it had, how it was built, why it was built. Then we'll go over the history of each Halo. Then we'll do the same exact thing for the Neoterric Array, which is the array that we see in-game, built by the Lesser Ark. First, however, let's get one point of clarification out of the way. The Halo fans and the lore community are still in debate about this topic. Do Halos kill the Flood? Originally not. In Halo CE, Cortana tells us that Halo kills the Flood's food. This was, however, later retconned by Bungie in Halo 3. In fact, the entire ending of Halo 3 really makes no sense if Halos don't kill the Flood. This is later backed up by the Halo CE terminals and Halo Infinite. It is also backed up by the very nature in which the Flood infects the races of the galaxy, and who they can and cannot infect. Very briefly, the Halos were designed to attack a specific part of the body that the Flood uses to control its victims and spread its disease. By destroying that part of the body, it kills not only the body, but also the Flood inhabiting that body. Now, just to be very clear, Halos wouldn't work on eradicating the entirety of the Flood. Based on our evidence, the Halo would kill larger forms like combat forms, but they wouldn't kill simple organisms like flood spores or super spores. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to work, starting with the Greater Ark. The Greater Ark was the first Ark to be made, and it produced 12 massive Halos, 3 times the size of the Halos we see in-game. Shortly after the Human Forerunner Wars, the Master Builder, Faber of Will and Might, proposed the Ark and the Halos as a means of dealing with the Flood. This plan was directly opposed by the Didact and his Shield Worlds. If you want to know more about this, more about the Didact, I did a full biography on him, which you can find in the description below. Now, unfortunately for the Didact, the Ecumene Council greenlit the Master Builder's plan and ordered the end of the Shield World's construction. This led to the Didact's first exile. The Halos work on a technology created by a prominent builder that is named Wise Hands to Forge. This is not someone who is talked about very often, but his son is really important. Wise Hands to Forge was the last in a long line of Forerunners, builders specifically, that were hired to create this technology. Each one failed just like the previous one until he finally cracked the code. Something that he would, to his shame, explain to his son, Bornstellar makes eternal lasting. Now, something that is really important to mention here is that the Senescent Array had the technology of targeted attacks, meaning that they could be used effectively as weapons. They could show up in a system, cleanse one planet or a group of planets without hurting anyone or anything else within that system. That is not how the Neoterric Array works, the ones that we see in-game, and we'll talk about that when we get there. The Greater Ark had 2 purposes: to build Halos within its foundry, that's that middle section that actually creates the Halo rings, but also to serve as a nursery, testing facility, and habitat. Even though her husband was exiled, the librarian still had a massive influence over the Ecumene and its council, and she was able to force her hand in the creation of the Ark and its Halos. This is why that they are livable with flora and fauna. Species throughout the galaxy would be brought here to live and grow, with the eventual plan being the receding efforts after Halos fired. This was something that was called the conservation measure. This is basically an indexing of as many life forms as possible just in case halos had to be used. Because remember, at this point, Halo is still seen as an option by the Forerunners. They still thought that there was a chance that they could fight the Flood. Within its foundry, the Ark processed material strip-mined from planets and created Halo. Through automated systems and Sentinels, Halos are built. Like I said, it does this, but is also used as a nursery and refuge by the Lifeworkers until the fall of Maithrillian. Now, Maithrillian was the Forerunner's capital system that falls to Mendicant Bias after he fires a Halo on it. After this, the strategic command of the Ecumene is transferred here to the Greater Ark, and basically every surviving Forerunner that could was moved here. They also tried to transport their controlled Halos, but only one made it, which we'll talk about when we get to Omega Halo. Once the Forerunners got to the Greater Ark, there was an emergency war council where the Forerunners debate about what to do next. Again, this is detailed in my Didact video, but the general gist of the conversation is Born Stellar is being criticized for losing to the Flood so badly, and they want the Didact, Shadow of Sundered Star, to come back. Unfortunately, Shadow had sort of recused himself of that responsibility, and so the Didact basically says, I'm all you got. It is also during this war council that the Master Builder shows up and he tells the Ecumene that he has been working on something, and that there has been a second Ark constructed in secret with a second Halo array, this being the Lesser Ark and the Neoterric Array. Very shortly after this, the Flood arrives and attacks, and they're able to overrun the Ark and destroy both the Ark and Omega Halo. Those that were able to escape fled to the newly revealed Lesser Ark. Now, the Greater Ark was around for about 9,000 years, and really this is the only information we have on it. It's a grand setting with very little actually happening on it, whereas a setting like Zeta Halo is going to take up like half of this video. But with the Greater Ark out of the way, we can now turn to the Senescent Array. Before we get into a case-by-case basis of all the individual Halos, we're going to talk about some of the knowns for the Senescent Array, as it's sort of shrouded in mystery. In the first, a Halo ring was used on Janjar-Kom in Halo Cryptum. Now, we do not know which Halo this is. If I had to guess, I would probably say it was Omega Halo, one of the two that we know the most about, but that is not confirmed, or that is simply my own speculation. Once the use of this Halo was made public, the Master Builder is brought to Maithrillian and is interrogated and put on trial. So let's talk about the fall of Maithrillian. When the Master Builder was put on trial, every single one of the 12 gyres was here. Now, I say gyres, it's probably not right. But I say gyres, you know. Anyway, all 12 gyres were here, and there was a massive battle. 5 of them were taken by Mendicant Bias, 1 was destroyed by the Forerunner, so now we're down to 11, and again, we don't know which is which during this whole thing. 7 rings under the control of the Forerunners tried to get moved to the Greater Ark, and only 1 survived. 6 of them were destroyed in transit. Now, this was a really big problem with the larger array. They were just so massive that they were very difficult to move. The one that made it was Omega Halo, and at this point there were 5 Halos remaining. Omega Halo, Zeta Halo, and then 3 unknown Halos. Now, to our best knowledge, the 3 unknown Halos were destroyed by the Flood and the Star Roads. Zeta Halo has a whole history to it that we'll get into. Same thing with Omega Halo. Now, like I said when I was detailing the Greater Ark, these Halos are absolutely massive. 30,000 kilometers in diameter, and have that feature of targeted pulses, which would make them effective weapons. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Senescent Array, there just isn't that much information on most of these Halos. Now, when it comes to gyres 1 through 8, 10, and 12, we have basically no information whatsoever. We don't know where they went. We don't know how they were used, or if they were used. We don't know when they fell to the Flood, and we don't know how they fell to the Flood. In fact, during the entirety of the Forerunner trilogy, basically, they're pretty much never mentioned outside of the Greater Halo Array. And the only 2 that are mentioned, like I've said before, is Omega Halo and Zeta Halo. Omega Halo is really interesting. It was one of the weapons used by the Master Builder, and one of the two surviving Halos after the fall of the Forerunner home planet Maithrillian. Or not home planet, capital planet. After the fall of Maithrillian, the Forerunners moved to the Greater Ark, and Omega Halo was the only one that survived transit. One thing that's really interesting here is that the Forerunners decided to put ancient humans on Omega Halo. These were devolved humans that were stationed on Omega Halo under the Librarian's control. Now, when the Didact, Shadow of Sundered Star, the Didact, Born Stellar, and the Librarian showed up at the Greater Ark, they had a small meeting. Things didn't go well. Again, if you'll remember this from my Didact biography, the Didact makes his way to Omega Halo, where he composes the 2 million humans that are stationed there, and this action would lead the Librarian to follow him to a shield world Requiem, where she would imprison him into a cryptum. Again, this is all detailed in my Didact biography video. It's during this time that the Flood arrives at the Greater Ark and Omega Halo, and fighting breaks out. Now, one thing that's really important to mention here is the Star Roads. The Star Roads were used as a weapon by the Flood, and Halos have the unique ability to be able to damage Star Roads, as they are able to damage pretty much anything of precursor origin. And so when the Star Roads showed up, Born Stellar, Bitterness of the Vanquished, the Examiner, and the Master Builder went to Omega Halo in order to use it against the Star Roads. The Master Builder was able to convince the other 3 that he should be the one to fire the weapon, and he fires that targeted pulse towards Path Chthona. This also cuts a path for escape from the Greater Ark. Unfortunately, however, they weren't able to save themselves, as the Star Roads were able to quickly recapture the Halo and basically tear it apart. During this time, as it's being sheared apart, the friction and heat turn some of the Halo into molten metal, and this actually kills the Master Builder, Bitterness of the Vanquished, and the Examiner. Luckily, however, the Didact, Born Stellar, is able to escape from this, as he is saved by the Monitor 343 Guilty Spark, who we'll talk about in a little bit when we get to Zeta Halo, when it was part of this array. Now, Zeta Halo has a lot of history, and for this reason we're going to split it up between its time in the Senescent Array and its time in the Neoterric Array. Just to avoid any confusion right now, we're going to talk about it in its time in the Senescent Array when it was Gyre 11, and a little later we'll talk about it when it is Installation 07 of the Neoterric Array. Like the others, it was created by the Greater Ark. Now, this Halo is special in many ways. When the Didact was awoken from his cryptum, he almost immediately makes his way to Charam Hakor, where he found out not only had the Halo plan been green-lit, but they were actually built and used. Specifically, Zeta Halo was used here, and it destroyed precursor ruins. Like the other 11 Halos, Zeta Halo was put under the control of Mendicant Bias, and the main part of the AI's housing was actually placed on Zeta Halo. When the Halo was fired on Charam Hakor, it released something. There was a cell on this planet that housed something called the Primordial. When its shackles were destroyed by Halo's pulse, it was brought to Zeta Halo. Life workers on the ring studied the creature, and this was millions of years after the Forerunners' genocide of the precursor, so they didn't really know what this thing was. That knowledge had, for the most part, passed from living memory, and the Forerunners actively hid that knowledge from those who didn't already know about it. When it awoke, the Master Builder did not trust the life workers to do any interrogations on this creature, so instead, he had Mendicant Bias interrogate him. And it was this conversation that made Mendicant Bias change his allegiance from the Forerunners to the Flood. In fact, he believed in the Flood to such an extent as to take this ring, Zeta Halo, to an unknown location, and he even allowed the Flood to run free on sections of Halo. From this point on, Zeta Halo was missing, and it remained missing for over 40 years. This is also the Halo that ancient human prisoners were taken to, and that the Master Builder used for Flood experiments. Now, most of this comes from the second book in the Forerunner trilogy called Primordium, and if I'm going to be totally honest with you, it's a walking simulator, and I really don't recommend you read it unless you're really into ancient human lore, but not even ancient human lore, but devolved ancient humans that are just stuck on a Halo. But like I said, at some point, the Master Builder and Mendicant Bias started running experiments on humans, specifically in a place called the Palace of Pain. This is where the Forerunners discovered that humans were seemingly immune to the Flood. Now, like I said in the Didact video, there's some contradicting information here. I'm going to operate under the more commonly confirmed information that the Flood used this as a strategy, that humanity didn't actually come to a cure. The Master Builder and Mendicant Bias did so many experiments on so many humans that the humans on the ring abandoned their cities and entire societies collapsed. They turned into nomadic hunter-gatherers just to try to hide from the Forerunners. Zeta Halo was brought to the Ecumene during the Master Builder's trial, and it was fired. Like I said, it had been missing for over 40 years at this point, and there was a huge battle here. The Forerunners attempted to take control of the Halos that were under Mendicant Bias's control. The Forerunners opened fire on Zeta Halo itself, and the Master Builder and the Sentinels tried to defend it, and they were successful-ish in doing so. Zeta Halo was fired, wiping the Forerunner capital system, and it retreated into slipspace, but not after a ton of ships landed on it. Now, this is when we get into the walking simulator. One of the ships that crashed on the Halo carried none other than a human named Chakas, the friend of Bornstellar and Riser, and who would become 343 Guilty Spark. He was very badly injured, but he was taken in and cared for by a woman named Venevra. He had a really hard time communicating at first, but after a while they were able to communicate really well. Now, for the next while, they pretty much just start walking, and honestly, that's the majority of this book. It has some interesting things too, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it's just walking. One of those interesting things is that Chakas had been implanted by a life worker with the consciousness of Forthenko Oberun. This was the Lord of Admirals for ancient humanity when they fought against the Forerunners, and the person that the Didact credits as the killer of its children. Venevra introduced Chakas to her grandfather. This is an old man named Gamelpar. This was a man that was born on Earth and taken to Zeta Halo. The trio start walking again. Venevra is following her Gaius, implanted into her by the librarian. This led them to the Palace of Pain, where they saw the Primordial herding humans like cattle. The trio very quickly got the hell out of there, and they wind up in a human city. One of those cities that I mentioned earlier that was abandoned when the humans got so scared of the Forerunners and being taken by them that they believed that leaving was just a more attractive option. This is when they discover a proto-gravemind, and again, they got the hell out of there. They were then found by a life worker and taken to a village where they were given food and allowed to rest. This is when they were found by Riser, the ancient human that was also present when they awoke the Didact and was spirited away by the Didact and Bornstellar. Riser told him that he shouldn't trust anyone here, and of course he was right to warn Chakas, as Chakas was taken by the life worker, and this is when he learns that the humans in the village were not actually alive. They were all hard light holograms of humans that used to live here, basically humans that the life worker had archived. He learns that the life worker's mission was to archive the humans so that they couldn't be taken to the Palace of Pain and consumed by the Flood. Not only that, but the life worker was also a hard light hologram itself, as they had archived themselves as to become immune to the Flood. After this encounter, Gamelpar dies, and the life worker wanted to take him and get his imprint and archive it, but Gamelpar didn't want that. So Chakas watched over Gamelpar as he died, promising to watch over his granddaughter, Venevra, as well. This village then had a power outage, and all of the holograms were shut down, so Chakas, Venevra, Riser, and another named Mara left the area. Again, they followed Venevra, and they found a transport vehicle and boarded it. This takes them down into the Halo's bowels, and it spits them out at the doorstep of Mendicant Bias, who then peers through the humans' minds in excruciating detail. He basically tortures them and uses a composer to rip their imprints from their bodies. Now, while all of this is happening, Zeta Halo was on a collision course with a planet. Now, this is sort of a fail-safe protocol. To my understanding, if Zeta Halo hadn't been contacted in a certain amount of time, it would then be sent on a collision course with a planet and be destroyed. This was very quickly approaching. Luckily, however, the Didact and the Forerunner showed up to save the day. Now, this is something to mention here because it's really kind of interesting to me. Chakas didn't recognize Bornstellar at first, instead referring to him as the Didact. He thinks that he's Shadow of Sundered Star. So Bornstellar's transition had gone so far that he looked so much like Shadow that Chakas didn't recognize him. But anyway, Bornsteller shows up, deactivates Mendicant Bias, and starts helping Chakas steer Halo away. They were successful in keeping the Halo from being completely destroyed, however, it was heavily damaged. Bornsteller ordered that the Halo be cut up, basically cutting out the most damaged parts of it, and he transported it to the Ark for further repairs. The Librarian also did some work on it as well, but the most important part here is that this is when Bornsteller took Chakas, who was very gravely injured. The pair of them interrogate the Primordial, and then they execute the Primordial in a time cell, aging it billions of years in mere seconds. By this time, Chakas was basically already turned into a monitor. Zeta Halo was shrunk down to a third of its size and retrofitted with the new Array's technology and was made Installation 07, Zeta Halo of the Neoterric Array. It was fired in tandem with the other 6 Halos to cleanse the galaxy, ending the ancient era of Halo. As we discussed earlier, the Lesser Ark was built in complete secrecy, and similar to how the Greater Ark built its Halos, this Ark created 6 Halos. Just like the Greater Ark, the Lesser Ark was created to be livable due to the Librarian's lobbying. And it's also sort of very rarely referred to as the Lesser Ark. It's much more commonly just referred to as the Ark or Installation 00, but it was called the Lesser Ark as well. This Ark was created in the utmost secrecy and for good reason. One thing that makes the Flood so terrifying is that they retain the knowledge of their hosts. So if they got to a Forerunner that knew the location of the Ark, they could then go to the Ark and destroy it just like they did to the Greater Ark. It was stationed 262,144 light years from the galactic center, and it was able to create halos that were 10,000 kilometers in diameter. After the events of the Greater Ark and Omega Halo, the survivors of that conflict made their way to Installation 00 using Faber's coordinates. While the Isodidact made final preparations for firing the Halo array, a few things happened to buy him some time. The Librarian goes to Earth, where she spends her final days with humans near Mount Kilimanjaro. Offensive Bias is sent to engage the Flood fleets led by Mendicant Bias. This happened because Mendicant Bias knew of the Ark, but he didn't know the exact location. The Didact completed his preparations and fired the Halo array, cleansing the galaxy of all sentient life. After this, Mendicant Bias was defeated in mere minutes by his successor, and a portion of him was taken back to the Ark and entombed in a spire called Epitaph. Here, Offensive Bias tore the AI apart layer by layer. The Forerunners left the Ark and went into self-imposed exile. From here until 2552, the Ark was left completely alone, sitting in extragalactic space for 100,000 years. In 2552, Covenant forces attacked a human world called Meridian. On one of its moons, they found one of the most important discoveries of their entire 3,000-year history, a luminary with the locations of the entire Halo array, the Ark, and portals to the Ark. Now, the Prophet of Regret was the one to discover this, and the closest portal location to him was a planet called Erde Tyrene. Of course, we call this planet Earth. When Regret arrived, he realized that opening the portal would be just too much for his relatively small fleet. He also didn't have the necessary tools to do so, and with the significant human presence on this planet and how hard they were fighting, he decides to leave. Just as fast as he arrives, he decided to go to one of the Halos instead. A month later, the Covenant would return to this planet, and this time they would have shards of the Forerunner crystal that would allow them to open the portal, as well as the Anodyne Spirit, the Forerunner Dreadnought. The Covenant was able to open the portal using these two and make their way to the Ark. For the first time in 100,000 years, the Ark was seen again. A joint elite and human battle group was then formed and sent to the Ark shortly thereafter, and immediately fighting broke out on the installation, both above it and on the ground. Despite being outnumbered 3-1, the elites were able to beat a brute-led Covenant in space combat, while the Master Chief, the Arbiter, and the Forward Unto Dawn would go to the installation to fight on the ground. The first thing they do is the Master Chief makes his way to the installation's cartographer to get a better understanding of their situation. On the way, they use a Scorpion tank and punch through the brute's defenses, even taking down a Scarab. I also like to think that he canonically took down all of the Phantoms, because I do. During this epic section of the game, the Master Chief destroys a staggering 16 ghosts, 8 wraiths, 9 choppers, 5 phantoms, and 1 pissing brute. Once at the cartographer, it's here that they learn where they're actually at. They didn't really know what this was, but now they know that they're at the Ark. And Guilty Spark says something pretty interesting here. He says that he's always assumed that the Ark was part of a shield installation, but obviously he was incorrect. He also explains that his makers didn't tell him everything about the Halo Array. They are able to find their location and Truth's location, and they form a plan to kill Truth, who was in the Ark's citadel. The Master Chief is attacked and has to fight his way to the lower level of the cartographer, and this is when something really interesting happens. The Master Chief encounters a brute named Cathejus. He was a high-ranking brute within the Covenant, and he was personally communicating with Truth during this whole thing, as the Chief was making his way through the cartographer. Once the Chief got to the brute, the Prophet ordered Cathejus to kill the demon himself, and so this duel happens, where if you don't attack any of the brutes on the perimeter of this area, they don't actually attack you, instead allowing a one-on-one duel to take place. Once Cathejus is killed by the Master Chief, however, his brutes then step in and are subsequently killed as well. The Master Chief regroups with the elites and Johnson and make their way to the Citadel to kill the Prophet of Truth. However, the Citadel is shielded. The Chief would attack one shield spire, Johnson and the Marines would take on another, and the elites would take on the final. The elites would be able to break their section, the Chief as well, but Johnson is unsuccessful and is taken hostage by the Covenant again, forcing the Chief to regroup with the elites and take Johnson's section down. This is when the Flood arrives using High Charity as a mobile delivery system. At this point, both arcs have now been attacked by the Flood. The Flood also takes out the Shadow of Intent's capability to glass the Citadel, making the Chief fight through to Truth. The brutes then muster their defenses. During this section, the Chief blows up an incredible 5 wraiths, 16 banshees, a phantom, 2 prowlers, and more ghosts than I bothered counting. Once that was done, the Arbiter joins him, and he says something really interesting. He says that the Flood has breached the Citadel's outer wall, and he orders the Monitor to activate a light bridge. Then he says that the Prophet will die by his hands, not the Flood. And so there's this sort of race going on where the Flood is trying to get to Truth, but so is the Arbiter, and they're racing to Truth to see who can kill him first. Inside the Citadel, Johnson is getting the shit beat out of him, and he's actually trying to get the brutes to beat him to death, so that he cannot be used to activate the Halo Array. It's actually really smart. Miranda attempts to save Johnson by wrecking a perfectly good and armed Pelican. She then decides that she has to kill Johnson and herself, but again, she fails in doing that when the Prophet of Truth shoots her in the back before she can kill Johnson. The Prophet of Truth then uses Johnson to activate the Halo Array. Once the Chief and the Arbiter get inside, something really incredible happens that's possibly unique. The Flood needs the Chief to turn off Halo. They need a reclaimer. And so for a very short period of time, humans, elites, and the Flood were allied. They fight their way to the command console, the Arbiter kills the Prophet of Truth, and the Chief shuts down the Halo Array. On the way out, the Flood turns hostile, and the Chief and the Arbiter have to fight their way out. This is when they discover that the Ark has been working on a replacement to Alpha Halo Installation 08, and the Chief decides that he's going to light it. But to do so, they need an activation index, and luckily, the Flood just delivered one. The Master Chief makes his way into the ruins of High Charity, and the Flood has done a fantastic job of remodeling. However, I think their take on interior design leaves a lot to be desired. The Chief is able to make his way to the control console that Cortana was left inside, and he asks her if she still has the activation index for Alpha Halo, and she confirms that she did. He then makes his way out, but not without the Arbiter's help, who shows up in the final minutes to help the Master Chief escape. The Shadow of Intent is loaded with survivors, and the Forward Unto Dawn is left nearby. The Chief the Arbiter and Johnson go to the new Halo to light it, which we'll talk about when we get to Installation 08. Once the Halo fires, however, the portal is shut down due to the damage that the Halo caused to the Ark. The Arbiter and the front half of the Forward Unto Dawn is able to make it all the way back to Earth, but the Master Chief in the back half of the Forward Unto Dawn does not make it back and is stranded in space. In March of 2553, the Office of Naval Intelligence sends probes to the Ark looking for the Master Chief and Cortana, and they also want to see if the Ark is still intact. These probes suddenly went offline. In December of 2553, the UNSC Rubicon went to the Ark via slipspace. When it got there, it too went missing. That was pretty much what ONI and the UNSC knew. Unknown to them, however, the UNSC Rubicon was successful in recovering a very important piece of Forerunner technology, the remnants of 343 Guilty Spark. They were able to wake him up and he answered their questions, he told them a story, and then he powered down. And the Rubicon just ejected his pieces into space. Unknown to them, however, he had already transferred himself into the ship's systems and had beaten the ship's AI. He then announces to the crew that he was going to go on a mission to find the Librarian and restore his old friends, Riser and Venevra, back to life. You see, he lost his memory when he was in the Monitor, but now that he is no longer in the small body, he started gaining his memory back. He then used the Ark's portal array to take the Rubicon back to the galaxy. Now, a man that was on the UNSC Rubicon was stranded. He had been torn apart by some sort of animal, and he was bloody and numb, and he crawls into a cave system where he meets 000 Tragic Solitude, the Monitor to the Ark, and he says that he can save the man. When the man asks why, he says that he's alone, and he doesn't have one of us yet, one of us being humans. Or one of you, I should say. This man doesn't really believe that he's having this conversation, just that he's dying and that his brain is doing a bunch of weird stuff to him. We'll talk a little bit more about this in more detail when we get to Zeta Halo, but very basically, a human scientist on Zeta Halo found that the Halo was counting down. And they come to the conclusion that this countdown has to be to the Halo going off. They were able to corroborate this story with some researchers that were on both Delta Halo and Gamma Halo, if I remember correctly. We'll talk about it when we get there. But they were able to confirm that this countdown was going across the entire Halo array. Now, Lord Hood read in the Arbiter on this, and the Arbiter recruits Usei Daham and Intho Saram to go to the Ark with the humans. These are the co-op elites from Halo 3. The Arbiter has to stay behind because if he went and he was successful, his enemies would be able to seize Sanghelios. The Arbiter also sends a third asset with them, a Huragok named Prone to Drift. These three then head to Earth to aid in the repair of the portal site and turn it on. As soon as the portal is opened by the Huragok, a sentinel, a retriever sentinel to be exact, passes through the portal and starts mining Earth. It was destroyed by the UNSC Endeavor. The joint human and elite team goes through the portal to the Ark, and they're baffled to get there in only a few hours when the team had already made preparations for this trip to take multiple weeks, 2 to 3 to be exact. Once they exit the portal, they are immediately attacked by more sentinels and they crash land on the Ark. The team leaves the crash site and makes their way towards the Ark's citadel, and on the way they have an encounter with wildlife, and that wildlife attacks them. During this fight, Olympia Vale, who was on this team, and this is before she became a Spartan, she is seemingly led away by a friendly creature called a Chafka. The team realizes this after the fight and splits up. Some go after Vale, some go toward the Citadel, and some turn back to their ship to bring the dead back, basically. After experiencing a terrible blizzard, the team that went after Vale decides to turn back and head towards the Citadel, hoping that they would be able to find the other half of their team and maybe Vale would be there too. Vale, on the other hand, is taken deep into the Forerunner megastructure, where she finds this weird golden hologram copy of herself. This hologram reveals itself to be the Ark's monitor, 000 Tragic Solitude, and he reveals to Vale that he was the one that started the countdown, and he did so because he was absolutely convinced of the destructive nature of both humans and elites. They came to this installation 3 years ago, and the destruction was devastating. He activated the Halo Array knowing that the humans would be able to activate the portal on the other side, on Earth, and he would be able to send sentinels through to Earth to mine humanity's homeworld for materials to repair the damage that the Ark sustained back in December of 2552. Tragic Solitude and Vale sort of argue back and forth for a while, and the two teams are able to catch up. They get to the Citadel where they're attacked by armatures. Some escape through a portal, some retreat down an elevator, but so I'm editing this now, and I've realized that I've done a terrible job at actually explaining what happened here. So, the team gets to the Citadel, and they have to split up again. Some of them go down an elevator shaft. When they get to the bottom, they find a damaged Sentinel. And Henry Lamb goes up to the Sentinel, trying to interact with it, and it actually comes back to life, and it stabs him in the neck. Usei Taham is then able to take the Sentinel down and destroy it, but Henry Lamb has injuries that they just cannot help at this point, and so he passes away on the Ark. This is why the research center that we'll talk about later on in this video is named the Henry Lamb Research Center, sort of as an homage to him. Vale and Solitude are still having their conversation. Tragic Solitude tells Vale that they were able to turn off the countdown, but he also then tells her that he was just going to turn it back on when he killed that team anyway. He then sends Sentinels through the portal, and they engage the UNSC's home fleet. This was devastating. It's not important to the focus of this video as it happens on Earth and not the Ark, but this devastates the UNSC's home fleet. They had sort of 3 years since the Human Covenant War to rebuild it, and then again, it's broken down to a handful of vessels before the attacks stop. Vale is able to contact the Huragok that they brought with them, prone to drift, and she tells him to deactivate Tragic Solitude. After this, she tells Tragic Solitude to kill her, as she refuses to live as his prisoner. So Tragic Solitude brings out this weird cyborg human. Solitude reveals that this was the human that he used to activate the countdown, because he needed a reclaimer to do so. If you remember back a couple minutes ago, I talked about a guy who was on the UNSC Rubicon but got stranded, and then he had a fight with some sort of beast, and he was broken and battered and numb, and he crawled into a gate. Cave. This is that guy. The team finally catches up to Vale. They finally find her, and this cyborg attacks her, and this team isn't able to help as there's an energy barrier between them. As Vale is fighting him, one of the Spartans on this team realizes that this cyborg is his long-lost brother, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like Hunters in the Dark very much, but that's just my opinion. Vale is able to calm the cyborg down by telling him his name or using his name, and the team is able to start damaging the Monitor's systems. The cyborg falls down, the Monitor starts attacking the team, the cyborg's brother then tends to him after the shield barrier comes down, and the cyborg then gets up and stabs the Monitor with his weird forearm sword thing. And this ends up killing both of them, both the cyborg and Tragic Solitude, who has a fantastic story, by the way. He has a short story in either Fractures or Evolutions. I want to say Fractures. The team then leaves, and they make their way back to their ship, and they realize that the Monitor was the one controlling the harsh weather and the wildlife that they encountered. They were able to get back to their ship relatively easily, and they treat their wounds. It is on the ship that a couple things happen. The Spartan that had his brother be turned into a cyborg, that Spartan was named Spartan Kodak, and he suggests to Vale that she join the Spartan branch. Of course, we know she does that as she's one of the playable characters in Halo 5. Then a fleet of ships comes through the portal, human ships, and they're able to tug the Mayhem, the ship that this team used to get here, back through the portal, and they return home. But now humanity had an open portal to the Ark on Earth, and so they had the capability to get researchers to the Ark in short order. And that's exactly what they did. This really didn't take off until 2 years later in 2525. In 2557, when the UNSC sent a team to the Ark to create a permanent research base. This would be called the Henry Lamb Research Outpost. Henry Lamb was another one of the researchers on Zeta Halo that discovered the countdown. The researchers here were able to do really, really incredible things. They were able to turn on the Retriever Sentinels that were shut down when 000 Tragic Solitude was destroyed. They were then sent into systems that had no life, and they were able to mine resources to repair the Ark. Very interestingly, they were guided by a human AI named Isabel. The researchers there also observed that the Ark is very, very resilient, being able to change its surface and its plant structures to accommodate the repair and the changes. In October of 2558, the portal to the Ark was closed when Cortana awoke the Guardians and attacked Earth. The act of bringing a Guardian to Earth triggered a failsafe protocol that shut down the portal. As long as a Guardian was active over the planet, the portal could not be reactivated. About a month later, in November of 2558, the Banished showed up. Now, I get asked all the time how the Banished got to the Ark if the portal was shut down, and the nature of slip space is such that its range seems to be nearly infinite. You just have to be able to survive the journey till the end. You have to be able to wait out that time, because slip space isn't instant. And so just like the UNSC Rubicon was able to jump into slip space and get to the Ark, so was the Banished. So as long as you have an active slip space drive and the capability to wait that long, and it would be a really long time, probably one of the longer slip space voyages in history, then you're able to get to the Ark. And that's exactly what the Banished did. Like I said, they arrived in November of 2558, and they went crazy. They absolutely slaughtered the humans there, both the UNSC forces and the researchers. However, curiously, after this happened, a short time after this happened, the UNSC Spirit of Fire was brought to the Ark. How? Now, this is another thing that I get asked almost daily. The short answer is that someone brought them here. The long answer is that someone brought them here, and we have absolutely no idea who, and we don't really know anyone in the galaxy that would have the capability to do something like this. This is extraordinary stuff. Remember that the reason the Spirit of Fire was unable to get back to human-controlled space is because they sacrificed their slip space engine, and so they had no way to get there in the first place. So it's really incredible, and we have no idea how they got to the Ark. Upon finding the Ark, they send a Spartan team down to find out, one, what this installation is, but also why there are human structures and why there are human transmissions, and what happened to these humans. Now, what's really important to remember here is that the Spirit of Fire was missing for 28 years, just drifting through space. They weren't around for the closing days of the Human Covenant War, where humanity found Forerunner installation after Forerunner installation, traveled to multiple halos and the Ark itself. So they had no idea what this thing was, who built it, what it was for, and the Spartan Fire team goes down to the Henry Lamb outpost that I mentioned earlier, where they encounter that AI I mentioned earlier, Isabel. They were able to take her, but then they encounter a brute like no other they had ever seen before. Atriox. Atriox beats the absolute hell out of them, severely wounding Douglas and crushing his helmet. Atriox sends his brutes after them as they flee, and Alice stays behind to cover Jerome and Douglas's escape. Alice then stays behind enemy lines to fight the Banished, guerrilla style. She's able to liberate some of the Banished hostages, human hostages, and she is given control of the UNSC forces in her area. The other Spartans were able to get back to the ship, where Isabel tells them Atriox's story. After this, Isabel urges Captain Cutter to cut their losses and flee the Ark. But Mama didn't raise no bitch, and so Cutter decides to stay.
We are just one ship. And an old one at that. But here we are. 30 years past what anyone could ask of us. Our war is gone. The lives we had are gone. The worlds we knew have moved on. And now, all that we may have left are those standing beside us. And the duty that defines us. Battle after battle, fighting side by side. Together. Where you see half a crew, Isabel, I see family. Courage. And 1,000 heroes who swore to fight their way through hell before they'd ever turn their backs and run. And where you see one old ship, I see home. And that is always worth fighting for.
And they become a massive thorn in the side of the Banished. The Spirit of Fire attacks salvage operations, they seize control of the Ark's cartographer, they gain access to a portal network, and they kill a very high-ranking and founding member of the Banished, Decimus. The Banished ship, the Enduring Conviction, then launches an attack on the Spirit of Fire, and in response, Jerome takes Isabel inside the ship where they are able to turn on its ventral beam and start glassing a small portion of the Ark. This alerts the installation's defense systems, and Sentinels attack the ship, using their constructs as weapons and cutting the ship in two. Back on the Spirit of Fire, a plan comes to life. The humans have learned a lot about the Ark and the Halo Array, Isabel cluing them in on a lot of the stuff, and they discover that the Ark has been creating a replacement to Installation 04. They also discover that the original Alpha Halo was relatively close to Reach, and that makes sense because it's where the Pillar of Autumn fled when Reach was falling. So the plan was, Ellen Anders would ride the Halo to where Installation 04 used to be, and then hopefully be able to signal the UNSC to send help. When the Halo rises from the Ark's forge, basically everyone on the Ark could see it. The Ark is sort of constructed in a half dome like so, and the halo rises from the center. And so pretty much anyone on the Ark would be able to see this massive construct moving up. Atriox watches it rise and immediately orders his shipmaster Let Valar to get forces on the ring, and they are engaged by UNSC forces. Anders is able to get into the Halo's control room and disable its firing systems and get a communications beacon ready to go. She discovers that she can also eject portions of Halo into space, and so she's able to throw the Banished, literally throw them away. The Halo is then sent into slipspace towards Installation 04's old home. Unfortunately, it doesn't get there as it is pulled from slipspace by a Guardian. And that's pretty much all we know about that aspect of it. We have no idea what happened to Anders. We have no idea what happened to her when the Guardian would have been shut down in 2559, so unfortunately that's pretty much all we know. The conflict on the Ark was not close to being over yet. During the battles that I have already talked about, the Banished released the Flood from the remains of High Charity. Now I don't put much detail here because there just really isn't that much detail to be told, but two brute brothers, Pavium and Vortis, open High Charity. The Flood pours out, and Atriox basically tells them to clean up this mess or really bad stuff is in their future. They discover that the Flood has created a proto-Gravemind and is in the process of creating another full Gravemind. The brothers were able to reactivate the defense network, and with the help of Retriever Sentinels were able to kill the proto-Gravemind and lock the Flood back into High Charity. In October of 2559, only 2 months before the beginning of Halo Infinite, Atriox and the Banished raid the Forerunner key ship that the Covenant used to open the portal way back in Halo 3. They raid the Forerunner key ship to find that the Forerunner crystal shards from First Strike that Halsey found on Reach and did a bunch of weird stuff in slipspace that ODST tried to blow up and did blow up. Well, at the very end of First Strike, Tartarus finds these shards and he presents them to the Prophet of Truth, and this is how they're able to open the portal in the first place. So those shards were on the Anodyne Spirit. Atriox is able to find them. Atriox also sends a message to Escharum back in the galaxy and tells him that he wants to open the portal complex under a mountain on Reach. He wants this to be opened so that, one, he can return to the galaxy, but also so reinforcements can quickly get to the Ark, because the Spirit of Fire is being a real bastard. As it were. They were successful in doing so, and Atriox returns to the galaxy through that portal. A brute named Castor has his own ex-Covenant faction called the Keepers of the One Freedom, and they're working in the Banished. And they actually have humans in their ranks. They steal Atriox's ship when he returns to the galaxy, and they take the ship through the portal to the Ark. Now, the Keepers of the One Freedom were a religious organization that still believed in the Great Journey. They have taken in a band of humans that seemingly also believed in the Great Journey. Unbeknownst to them, however, these were undercover Oni agents called the Ferret Squad, Inspector Veda Lopez, and 3 Gamma Company Spartan 3s, Mark, Ash, and Olivia. The Keepers find themselves in a 3-way battle between the Banished, the UNSC, and the Covenant that survived Halo's blast by hiding inside the Forerunner keyship. This group was led by a Sanchean prelate named Das Basvad. The Keepers aligned themselves with the Covenant, and this new alliance is nearly successful in firing the Halo array until the Spirit of Fire is tipped off by the Ferrets, and they were able to mac the area where the Keepers tried to light the rings. Following this, the Ferrets, minus Mark, joined the Spirit of Fire's crew and continued to help in the fight against the Banished. Mark was killed by Das Basvad on the Ark. His neck got snapped, but it gave his team time to escape. He was buried in space above the Ark by the Ferrets. Now, unless I'm missing something, and god damn it, I hope I'm not, that is all the information we have on the Lesser Ark Installation 00, and so now we can talk about the Halos. The Neoterric Array was the 7 smaller halos, 6 constructed by the Lesser Ark, and the 7th being Zeta Halo. Much like the Isodidact's father, Bornstellar's father, Wise Hands to Forge, this was worked on by a builder named Maker of Moons. She was given a few tasks for this array, 1 to make them smaller, 2 to make them more deadly, and she did just that. These new halos would be about a third of the size of their now destroyed predecessors, but only 7 would be needed to cover the entire galaxy instead of the former 12. Now, we learn this from the point of view of the Didact when he is in the burn. Maker of Moons was also sent into the burn, where she would perish. It seems that she ran afoul of the Master Builder in some way. But she tells the Didact all of this before her death, and when she tells the Didact about the new Halo's weapon systems, it completely breaks the Didact. He has a mental episode over this. This is because this array would not be used as weapons, but only for mass sterilization. Like I said earlier, and as we saw them use, the old array had targeted pulses, but that is not the case for this array. If one of these halos would fire, it would kill everything within 25 light years of it with the press of a button. This is a mass gross violation of the mantle. It's also important to mention that these halos will share a couple of events. Basically, a couple things happen to every single one of them, like being put into standby mode by Tartarus when he tried to activate Delta Halo, and being put into a countdown by 000 Tragic Solitude, like we talked about earlier when we were discussing the Lesser Ark. But they would also be used as nurseries for species in the reseeding efforts. Bornstellar and his new wife Chant de Green and other surviving Forerunners wash over species as they grow on halos. Which halo for which species is largely unknown, and they were shipped using keyships to their home planets. One interesting thing of note, and this comes from Hunters in the Dark as well, is that once a halo is put into standby mode, it effectively made all of the halos inert. From this point on, until the Master Chief deactivates them, they would not be able to be used by traditional means. They could only be activated from the Ark. During this conversation on this subject, the entire human race's leading Forerunner experts are having this conversation in Bravo 6. They also talk about how if one halo is fired, it would send a super luminal beacon to the next halo to be fired. And then the next one would go off, and then the next one would go off. So if you fired one, it would start a chain reaction that would fire all of them until the entire galaxy is cleansed. So if Alpha Halo was set off in Halo CE, it would send a transmission to Beta Halo, that would then send a transmission to Gamma Halo, so on and so on. Unfortunately, like a few on this list, Beta Halo is one of those halos that we just don't have a lot of information about. But we do know a little bit about it. We know that it's said to have a desert-like landscape, and its monitor is named 001 Shamed Instrument. Aside from that, pretty much the only thing we know about this halo are the things that we know about every Halo. It was created to stop the flood. It would have gone off in sequence about 100,000 years ago, and it would be the second Halo to fire, as it is Beta Halo. Alpha Halo would be fired first, which is also another thing to bring up. I don't know if I've mentioned it, but Halos are named in two ways. One, installation 0 whatever. That is their order of creation, and then alpha, beta, gamma, so on and so on. That is their order of firing. So, Alpha Halo is installation 04. It was the 4th one to be created, but the 1st one to fire. When Tartarus activated Delta Halo, it would put Beta Halo along with the rest of the Halos in standby mode, and we also know that Tragic Solitude, again with all of the Halos, put Beta Halo into a countdown sequence that was then stopped when the team went to the Ark. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all we know about it. Pretty much everything I said about Beta Halo is the exact same for Epsilon Halo Installation 02. This is another one of those Halos that we have pretty much never seen in the greater Halo universe. It was created by the Forerunners, it would have fired in sequence, would have been put in standby mode by Tartarus, and would have been counting down when 000 Tragic Solitude did what he did. What we do know is that it is said to have a rocky and oceanic geography. We know that its anchor point was a planet called Tafros, and its monitor was 007 Contrite Witness. Unfortunately, that's all we know about Epsilon Halo. Gamma Halo is the first Halo of the Neoterric Array that we actually have a significant history to go over. Curiously, it was actually found by accident. In August of 2552, a freighter called the Floral Express was fleeing a planet called Tribute. Following the Cole Protocol, they entered a random slipspace vector and jumped into slipspace, and when they exited slipspace, they found a massive ring world. They then jumped to Earth, and once they arrived on Earth, they were all arrested by the Office of Naval Intelligence under suspicion of breaking the Cole Protocol, which had the penalty of death, by the way. After looking through the ship's flight plans, they realized that they did not in fact break the Cole Protocol, but found this weird ring world. Now, this ring world was Gamma Halo, and it's also important to mention that by the time the Floral Express got back to Earth, it was in early October. What this means is the Office of Naval Intelligence already knew about what happened on Installation 04, Alpha Halo, and so that makes them decide that they need to go back to Gamma Halo. So they send a team of pioneers to Gamma Halo, where they wanted to infiltrate the Librarian and take its activation index. However, they just didn't have the manpower, nor the arms and ammunition to do something like this. Unfortunately, at this time, this was also in late October, so Earth was under attack by the Covenant, so they couldn't retreat back to Earth, or they didn't want to retreat back to Earth. So instead, they hunkered down in an asteroid field above the Halo and create a station that they call Ivanov Station. Like every Halo in the Neoterric Array, on November 3rd, it went into standby mode when Tartarus tried to activate Delta Halo, and in early 2553, Ivanov Station expanded into an official and permanent station for the UNSC. By March of 2553, this is where a prisoner named Dr. Catherine Halsey was housed, and with this science station being so close to a Halo, this ring was intensively studied by research teams. This would have been a vast resource of Forerunner relics and knowledge for humanity, and they combed over its surface and searched its depths for technology and information. They were able to recover a couple of really substantial things. They recovered a War Sphinx's eye, the Halo's activation index, and the composer, or a composer, I should say. All of these were taken back to Ivanov Station for further study, and it is here that a research team was accidentally killed or composed by the composer when they were trying to study it. However, this gave the UNSC coordinates that the UNSC Infinity would then follow in 2557 that would lead the Infinity to Requiem, where they would be able to pick up the Master Chief, or make contact with the Master Chief again. After the Didact was awoken, his first stop was Installation 03, more specifically above Installation 03 to Ivanov Station, where he was able to recover his composer. He then almost immediately used the composer on the humans in Ivanov Station. Luckily, however, the Master Chief was unaffected, as he had had some changes given to him by the Librarian. The Didact then goes to Earth, where he is stopped by the Master Chief and is then rocketed into slipspace and deposited back on Installation 03, where he is greeted by a Spartan team who he pretty much immediately kills. He then makes his way to the composer's forge mention, while this is happening, a Covenant splinter faction shows up on Installation 03, where they steal the Forerunner relic called the Altar. This is basically a slip space device or a portal device, and Marines and Spartans show up and are able to stop them. The Didact then makes his way to the Composer's Forge, where he wants to start using halos. So he brings Installation 03 to the Composer's Forge. Luckily, by this time, Blue Team was around to investigate what happened to Black Team, and they're basically brought straight to the Didact, where a fight ensues. Now, the Monitor of the Composer's Forge actually ends up betraying the Didact because he believed that Promethean Knights and the Prometheans in general were abominations and were not to be used. For this, he starts to help the Master Chief, and they get the activation index, and he allows the Chief and the Didact into the control room, where the Master Chief disables Halo's security measures using the activation index. The control room is then ejected from Halo into the Composer's Forge, where the Master Chief and Static Carillion, the Monitor, are teleported away, leaving the Didact to fall into the Composer's Forge and be composed. Again, this is all detailed in my Didact biography. Installation 03 is then taken by Static Carillion to an unknown location, and its location is still unknown to the UNSC today. It's also important to mention, in 2555, Gamma Halo was one of the 2 halos that were able to corroborate Luther Mann and Henry Lamb's countdown theory by confirming that Gamma Halo was doing the exact same thing as Zeta Halo. As we've discussed with all of these halos, Alpha Halo would be the first to fire in the Neoterric Array and was the 4th to be built, with 343 Guilty Spark as its monitor. Now, there are some things that happen on Installation 04 Alpha Halo before humans and the Covenant ever show up to its location. The monitor, 343 Guilty Spark, did some experiments with ejecting some of its areas into space. There was also a mysterious ship that landed on the Halo thousands of years before humans or the Covenant ever got close to it. Now, we don't know what this alien race is, nor do we know why they came to Halo. They never exited their ship, and the only thing that really ever happened was it sent out an automated distress call that Guilty Spark blocked as protocol. Spark then eventually built a sarcophagus around this ship. Now, we don't know who this alien race is, but there is some speculation which you can look into. It's not canon, so I'm not going to mention it here. On September 19th, 2552, something extraordinary happened in the space above Alpha Halo. The Covenant and humans exited slipspace above the ring. For the first time in 100,000 years, the Halo Array was found by reclaimers. Actually, it's not. The Floral Express found its Halo before this Halo, so that's not true. The Floral Express was the first to find a Halo. For humanity, Alpha Halo was a mysterious ring world, and for the Covenant, it was one of the most holy and sacred relics. But how did they get here? On a planet called Sigma Octanus 4, the planet that would be used as a shield during the legendary Keys loop, this planet held the secret to Alpha Halo's location. When the Spartans were deployed to a city called Côte de Jour, they noticed something very odd. They discovered that the Covenant had taken up residence in a natural history museum. This struck the Master Chief as odd. At least to his observation, the Covenant really never cared about human history, so the Spartan team decided to investigate. Here they found that the Covenant was particularly interested in a rock, a hunk of granite with rubies inlaid into it, and when they took it back to Halsey, Cortana started studying it, and she realized that it was a map of sorts, and when accounting for about 100,000 years of cosmic drift, she found a match above a gas giant called Threshold. When Cortana on the Pillar of Autumn was ordered to find a slipspace vector in accordance with the Cole Protocol, she picked this seemingly random location to jump, and imagine Captain Key's surprise when he exited slipspace to find a giant, artificial, alien ring world. Now, almost immediately, a few things happen above Alpha Halo. First, the Covenant and the Pillar of Autumn get to work on each other. Long swords are sent out to help defend the ship, but it just really isn't enough. The Pillar of Autumn, even with its red flag upgrades, never stood a chance against this many Covenant ships. The Pillar of Autumn is boarded and the Master Chief is woken up. One thing of importance that I should mention is this fella. This guy is named Sam Marcus, and he is the one working the booth when the chief is taken out of cryo. Now, he is on the engineering staff and as such has been making a ton of repairs on the Pillar of Autumn in the last 19 days since it left Reach. He's gotten a very small amount of sleep during these last couple weeks, and whenever he felt down, he would look at a picture of his wife and he would look over the face that he loved, and unfortunately, as we all know, he was killed by the Covenant. While the Master Chief was making his way to the bridge to meet with Captain Keyes, Cortana is helping as best she can. She vents atmosphere in some sections of the ship that are heavily infested by the Covenant. Interestingly enough, she does this regardless of human presence. In her words, it would be better to die in vacuum than at the hands of the Covenant. The Chief gets to the bridge and is given his orders. Get off the Pillar of Autumn and keep Cortana safe. And just before Cortana is given to the Master Chief, she is ordered by Captain Keyes to find possible landing vectors on the ring world. She is given to the Chief along with the Captain's sidearm, and the Chief gets to work trying to get off of the ship. He's able to pick up ammo from a dead ensign, and the Chief makes his way through the ship and is able to get onto an escape pod, but not after thumping a seemingly insignificant elite on the head. This elite is then taken by a group of grunts and they are able to escape before the ship enters atmosphere. Captain Keyes sets the ship on a landing sequence and he makes his way to an escape pod with his bridge crew and my beloved Ensign Lovell. Unfortunately, a cloaked elite is able to sneak his way onto the escape pod that the bridge crew was getting onto, and he is almost successful in being unnoticed, but the captain, and only the captain, notices an almost imperceptible shimmer. He asks his neighbor for his pistol. He gave his pistol to the captain, and Keyes killed the elite. It's also important to mention here that at this point, 343 Guilty Spark had cleared the Pillar of Autumn to land on Halo along with its Reclaimer inhabitants. He also seemed to have some sort of interaction with the Covenant AI, and he warned the Covenant AI of the Flood, and the AI kind of really didn't give a shit. Now, sometime before this happened, the ODSTs on this ship, at Antonio Silva's orders, were sent into their drop pods and rocketed towards the surface. They do this to the tune of the ODST anthem played on a CD player, which I think is pretty funny. On the way down, Silva had already scouted out a location for a place that would eventually become Alpha Base. As all of the surviving occupants of the Pillar of Autumn fell towards the surface of this unknown and strange ring world, the Pillar of Autumn headed to the surface. Now, Keyes had a plan for the Pillar of Autumn to sort of pancake in on itself. One deck falling into the other, into the other, into the other, effectively destroying the ship and everything inside of it. But the calculation this was based on assumed zero gravity and wasn't rated for planetary gravity or atmosphere. So luckily, this did not work. I say luckily because the Autumn was able to land somewhat intact and it would be very useful later on. Now, unfortunately, when the Chief lands, everyone in his escape pod is killed on impact. Canonically, the Master Chief destroys one Banshee, kills the grunts by the escape pod, and then works his way up the cliff and fights the Covenant there. This is when he realizes that he has been fighting as if he were still fighting with his team of Spartans with him. Up until this point, the Master Chief was rarely alone. He pretty much always had his legendary blue team with him. He realized at this point he would have to make some significant changes to his tactics if he wanted to survive, which he did, obviously. The Chief would go on to save a few stranded squads of Marines and Navy personnel. His gunner was a Marine of the last name Fitzgerald, and the very first time that the Master Chief interacts with a Forerunner piece of technology here, something really interesting happens. The Master Chief just sort of instinctively knows what button to press. Now, while this was happening, the Battle of Alpha Base was happening, as well as the bridge crew were making their way across the terrain to find somewhere safe. Unfortunately, one of them was starting to crack, a woman named Ellen Dowski. She suggests surrender, and now anyone in their right mind knows that this is the worst thing to do, worst case scenario, but obviously she was not in her right mind, but she kept bringing it up, and finally Keyes and the bridge crew just had enough, and they make a critical error. They tie up Ellen, and they leave her for the Covenant to find. That is a critical error that they should not have done, and we'll get there in a second. Back at Alpha Base, or what would become Alpha Base, things were going really, really well. More Covenant soldiers were killed than humans, and the UNSC is able to take control of the Butte. This is where the Master Chief heads after the mission Halo is completed. Unfortunately for the bridge crew, around this time, Ellen is captured by the Covenant, and she helps them find Keyes and the others, wearing a smirk on her face when she finds them. Like almost anyone could predict, they are all lined up Ellen points out Keyes as the leader, and one by one, each one is systematically executed. Ellen is saved for last, and she gives a bleak apology to Keyes as she is executed with her own weapon. And the elite who did so also felt it necessary to insult the ballistics weapon as being primitive. Unfortunately, this would be the deaths of the beloved Lieutenant Hakawa and Ensign Lovell. Once at Alpha Base, Chief is called to see Silva, and this is where the infamous roast happens. He berates the Master Chief for being a Spartan, saying that the Spartans were failures, that they're not normal, and that normal people and hardworking people like the ODSTs were going to be the ones to win the war for humanity, not freaks like the Master Chief and his now dead Spartans on Reach. The Master Chief just is sort of forced to take this abuse, but finally Silva asks if they're on the same page, and Chief simply says, "No, sir." And this makes Silva relent, and the two are then able to have a talk about shared loyalty, and the two are then finally able to have a productive conversation. While this is happening, Captain Keyes is taken to the Truth and Reconciliation, where he is subsequently and mercilessly tortured and interrogated. This is a brutal process, and he is in severe pain. Also on the Truth and Reconciliation, that seemingly insignificant elite that was recovered by grunts has somewhat healed from his wounds, and he recruited the grunt who saved him. This is Zuka Zamami and the grunt Yayap. Zuka pleads to the prophet that was on this ship that he needed a hunter-killer squad to hunt down the Master Chief. The thinking being that this is an exceptional warrior and someone who has killed hundreds if not thousands of Covenant troops over the war. Now obviously this is sort of old lore and is not exactly current nor canon, because we know that the Master Chief has slaughtered thousands or hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of troops with nukes and other sorts of things at this time. However, Zuka is denied his request, and so he goes to help in the interrogation of the human Captain Keyes. The two go back and forth for a little bit, and Keyes leaves him with the parting words that next time you run into the Chief, you might consider ducking. On the night of September 19th, the Master Chief is sent on a daring mission to rescue Captain Keyes on the Truth and Reconciliation. He is able to work his way to the ship, and during this entire section, Echo 419, Foehammer is dropping troops both for backup, but also for weapons and ammunition resupply. There's also somebody sort of following the Master Chief during this entire section and is sort of grabbing all of the Covenant weaponry and is stashing them on Foehammer's Pelican so that they can be taken back to Alpha Base to help bolster its defenses, just to make sure that they have enough weapons in case the Covenant attacks. Now, while the Master Chief enters the Truth and Reconciliation, though these people look like Marines and have Marine armor, canonically they are ODSTs, and the Chief is able to enter the ship and make his way through the ship, and in this hangar he orders the ODSTs to stay behind because he notices that they're just slowing him down, and they are in a race against the clock to find Captain Keyes. Once free from this burden, he quickly makes his way to Keyes and kills the Covenant guarding him and is able to break him along with some other Marines out. It's actually pretty sick. This cloaked elite canonically catches his guts that the Master Chief shot out of his body before he falls dead. The captain, the Spartan, and the ODSTs regroup, and they actually try to call for Foehammer. However, she is being pursued by Banshees, and so she's not able to come and pick them up. Instead, they end up taking a Spirit dropship, and luckily, Captain Keyes just so happened to know how to fly one of these things, and so they're able to escape the ship. Now, it is the raid on the Truth and Reconciliation that finally gives the Covenant to allow Zuka Zamami to hunt down the Master Chief, and so he starts to put together a plan. Back at Alpha Base with their captain back safely in UNSC hands, they start to come up with their own plan of how to stop the Covenant from using Halo as a weapon. By this point, they have come up with the idea that either Halo itself is a weapon, or it has weapons that would be able to wipe out either the Covenant or humanity, whoever gets to it first. And Captain Keyes says something that's pretty funny here. He says that if the Covenant learns how to use Halo as a weapon, we're cooked, which in itself isn't that outlandish of a thing to say, but it's kind of funny with today's context of that saying. This is when a couple plans are made. Firstly, the Master Chief would take a team of Marines and go and find the silent cartographer. And while this is happening, Keyes, Johnson, and another squad of Marines would try to find a weapons cache. So these two things are sort of happening at the same time. One team is going to attack the island and try to find the silent cartographer, and Team 2 is going to raid an underground facility to try to find that weapons cache. The Master Chief is successful in finding and accessing the silent cartographer. However, the other team has a much worse fate. They find something underneath Alpha Halo, something so horrible that it defies logic: the Flood. Every single one of these Marines is infected by the Flood, including Captain Keyes and Private Jenkins. However, one is left somewhat untouched: Sergeant Avery J. Johnson. We get really fantastic insights into what it's like to be infected by the Flood by both Keyes and Jenkins, and one of the most visceral reactions we get is from Captain Keyes, who has his entire mind flooded with a hunger so overbearing and disgusting that it makes him nauseous. While the Master Chief is in the silent cartographer, Zuka Zamami sets a trap for him. He has 2 hunters and a bunch of grunts waiting for the Master Chief. The Master Chief is able to make quick work of them, and Zuka realizes that he is severely outmatched, so he hides in a supply crate, which is pretty funny. He then returns to the Truth and Reconciliation to report what happened. The basic gist of this conversation is that Zuka would only leave the ship alive if he was able to convince the Prophet of Stewardship of his competence, which he's able to do. And that would be the only reason that he would be given one more chance, and if he failed, he'd be executed. This is when Zuka's plan starts to really take full shape. First, Yeyep would be beaten nearly to death. He gets the shit kicked out of him, is left with a ghost next to him in a place where Zuka knew humans would find him. And in fact, they do. Lieutenant McKay and her team finds him and takes him to Alpha Base. As he's sitting there, he has the instructions to signal Zuka if the man in green armor is around. Of course, we know that at this point, he isn't around because he just accessed the silent cartographer and is now making his way to the control room of Alpha Halo. When he gets to the control room, Cortana is put into the control panel and she is flooded with information, a wealth of information, so much information that it may have accelerated her deterioration into rampancy, and she's only about 4 years old at this point. 3 years old. This is also when she learns that the captain and his squad have put themselves into a much more dangerous situation than they first thought it would be. Of course, we know that what has happened to the squad has already happened, but Cortana and the chief didn't know that, and so she tells the chief to run as fast as he can to get to Keyes and save him. And he does just that, sprinting out of the control room and calling for Foehammer for a ride, and she takes him to the approximate location where Captain Keyes was. While the chief is in the bowels of Alpha Halo trying to find Captain Keyes, Zuka Zamami kidnaps a human pilot, and this human pilot takes him to Alpha Base. They use sort of this Star Wars trope of their old codes, but they're still active and they still work, and the pilot is able to touch down on Alpha Base, and Zuka pretty much immediately executes him. Along with this human dropship, 6 Covenant dropships attack the base, and it's actually really interesting. The UNSC personnel on Alpha Base flood the area with fuel and light it to burn away a good number of the Covenant forces. Zuka Zamami is able to make his way down into the holding cells where he is reunited with Yeyep. They blow the doors to the cell, and Yeyep leads the elite to a Banshee under the guise of finding the green armored human that they were hunting. This is when Yeyep says that you're gonna fly this thing out of here because you know how to, and I don't, and this is our only chance of survival. And he actually threatens Zuka with a plasma pistol. The two then get on the Banshee and escape Alpha Base. While this is going down, the Master Chief is trying to find Keyes, and he's just too late. Keyes has already been taken by the Flood along with the rest of the squad, save the Sergeant. He does, however, encounter the monitor of the installation, 343 Guilty Spark, who convinces the Master Chief to help him activate Halo. Of course, the Master Chief had no idea what this actually meant, but in time he would. Guilty Spark takes the Chief to the library where he fights through hordes and hordes of Flood. The captain is further deteriorating into the Flood, and this is one of the most deeply impactful things that happens in the entirety of the Halo franchise. Keyes at first believes that this is a new form of Covenant interrogation, and so he forces himself to forget everything he knew. Earth, his daughter, Halsey, everything. He focuses on his serial number, and it's all that he allows himself to give away, as is UNSC policy. He latches onto his neural lace and realizes that this is the only thing that the Flood or this new Covenant technology can't creep into. Unfortunately, this is pretty much the last we're able to see of the Captain with any sort of consciousness. Back in the library, the Master Chief comes across a human corpse that actually made its way pretty far into the library. He bends down and retrieves the dog tags to reveal that this was a man named Marvin Mabuto, and this is one of the areas where the book The Flood kind of loses me. In this book, the Master Chief talks like he doesn't talk in any other book. He talks like an 80s Vietnam War movie action hero, and it's just so silly. He says, "I didn't know you, Sarge, but I sure as hell wish I had. You must have been one hardcore son of a bitch." Which is so silly for the Master Chief to say. He just doesn't talk like that. Anyway, the Master Chief is able to retrieve the activation index and is teleported to the control room where the confrontation with Cortana happens. She has learned Halo's secrets and knows exactly what would happen if Halo were to fire, and then she takes the activation index. And this really pisses off Guilty Spark, who tries to activate the ring anyway. So the Chief has to go and manually make sure that the ring can't fire. At this time, he does so by overloading 3 generators. John and Cortana then decide that they need to destroy the Halo by overloading the Autumn's reactors. But to do this, they would need to find Captain Keyes. Jenkins at this point doesn't know if the thing that has invaded his mind knows that he's still around. He believes that he is unique, as he has tried to signal to his other squad mates and they have not reciprocated. He's also frantically looking around for a weapon, a gun, a grenade, a knife, anything he can use in order to kill himself. Around this time is when the Flood reveals themselves to the other humans on the ring. They observe that the Covenant seemed somewhat familiar with the Flood, whereas the humans were completely bewildered by this new enemy. And in fact, it was Jenkins that was a part of this pack of Flood that attacked, and Jenkins was taken alive while the rest of them were killed. Jenkins is taken to Alpha Base, and here he and McKay have a moment where she recognizes him, she knows who he is, and she weeps at what he has become. Cortana is able to teleport Chief to the Truth and Reconciliation, where the Captain is being held again, and when they get there, they realize that the ship has been overrun by the Flood. Now, the Flood was trying to attempt to repair the ship in order to leave Halo and infect the galaxy. The Master Chief, however, just wanted the Captain, so he fights his way through the ship, under the ship, and then back through the ship, where he finds Captain Keyes has been infected by the Flood. They don't know at the time what they're looking at, but the Captain has been transformed into a proto-Gravemind, the first step in the Gravemind process. The Chief takes the Captain's neural implant, destroying the Captain's brain in the process, something that I think Keyes is very thankful for in the end. The pair then make their way to the Pillar of Autumn. Now, when the Chief and Cortana are on their way to the Pillar of Autumn, they let the surviving UNSC personnel on the ring know that they're about to blow up the installation and everyone needs to get the hell out of there. Antonio Silva gets the bright idea that he should take the Truth and Reconciliation, load Jenkins into it, and take it to Earth. This is why I always say that Silva is a glory-hungry dipshit. This breaks just about every article of the Cole Protocol, puts the entire galaxy at risk of being consumed by the Flood, and in his mind, he would be greeted home as a hero when he returns to Earth, with a Covenant ship and a new alien life form to study. Pretty much everyone of importance close to the man is telling him that this is a horrible idea, and Lieutenant McKay realizes that Silva is a glory-hungry dipshit, and so she destroys a piece of critical infrastructure in the ship after being talked to by the AI Wellesley and having a really touching moment with Jenkins where she realizes that Jenkins is still in there and he wants her to do it too, and so she does. She uses a grenade to destroy this critical piece of infrastructure, and the ship crashes into Halo and kills everyone on board. Back on the Pillar of Autumn, the Chief is successful in overloading the ship's reactors, and he is able to make his way off of the ship in time. He gets onto a longsword and is able to fly away from Halo before it detonates. Now, I need to back up a little bit here because there's some lesser known lore that comes from an arcade game, Halo Fireteam Raven. I elected to save this until the end because it's not commonly known and I didn't want to confuse the 3 other sources that I were working with, being Halo Combat Evolved, the Flood, and the Halo CE terminals. The game starts with the ODST Fireteam Raven, fighting through the Pillar of Autumn and making their escape before the ship crashes on the ring. In the second mission, they link up with McKay and assist her in the raid on the Pillar of Autumn to bring supplies and weapons back to Alpha Base. And that leads into the third mission, where they defend Alpha Base. And the fourth mission, they help the Master Chief in the assault on the control room. While trying to get back, they are shot down, and they have to make their way to the Pillar of Autumn. That blows up and kills all of them. Now, in the debris field of Alpha Halo, the work isn't done yet. The Master Chief is still, they need to find a way home. There's a fleet of 7 Covenant ships led by the flagship called the Ascendant Justice, and the Chief picks up a beacon that leads him to cryopods that were jettisoned from the Pillar of Autumn when it was going down. The Chief jumps out of the longsword to retrieve them, but this is right in front of the Covenant ships, and they take notice. As they're bearing down on the Chief, a pelican attacks them, diverting their attention and allowing the Chief to get the cryopods. The 2 ships are then able to link up. Oh, no. Oh, I did that perfectly. Look at that. Ooh, perfect. Anyway, the 2 small ships are able to dock with each other, and the Chief looks down to see Sergeant Johnson. The Chief grabs Johnson and closes the hatch, and he puts a barrel to the sergeant's head, and basically he says, "The last time I saw you, you were dead. Like I saw you die." It was when Keyes and Jenkins and Johnson were in the bowels of Alpha Halo and the Flood attacked. Now, the Flood just wasn't picking up what the Sergeant was putting down, and so they let him go. There are theories as to why that happens later on in First Strike. Cortana is able to scan the Sergeant and confirm that he was not infected, and so the Chief lets him be, and the other survivors with Johnson, and they come up with a plan to steal a Covenant ship, which they're able to do. Unfortunately, the Covenant sabotage the ship, specifically its slipspace engines, and the Chief takes an engineer to go fix them, but during this time, Cortana maneuvered the ship into Threshold's atmosphere to try to shake off the Covenant. They followed, forcing them deeper and deeper and deeper until they reach a point of no return. Basically, every gas giant has a point of no return where a ship's engines just aren't powerful enough to escape the gas giant's crushing gravity. Basically, at this point, they were already dead, tumbling towards Threshold's core. After he is able to successfully repair the Ascendant Justice's slipspace engines, he tells Cortana to just try anything, because they're dead anyway. And this is when she realizes just how advanced the Covenant slipspace technology actually is. With some mathematical equation, she's able to jump into slipspace while in atmosphere, leaving the Covenant, Alpha Halo's wreckage, and Threshold behind. Now, you probably thought that we were done with Installation 04 Alpha Halo, but we are not. In February of 2556, a group of humans went to a fragment of Alpha Halo. Very basically, they found an elite that was using a bioweapon, and they were able to trace the bioweapon to this fragment. A team of Oni operatives, including Jameson Locke, go to this fragment with the help of the then decommissioned Spartan Randall, and Randall nukes it, which kills Randall, and Locke is able to get away. Delta Halo is really tough, right? I mean, it has a lot of unknowns to it, but it also has a cosmic horror space god on it, and that complicates things a little bit further. We'll start with the knowns, and then we'll talk about the unknowns. It's tethered to a gas giant called Substance, which is also what I call my best friend Kyle, a gas giant with significant substance. And its monitor is called 2401 Penitent Tangent, and now we'll get into some of their unknowns. Sometime after the Halo Array was originally fired, but before the Covenant and humanity arrived in November of 2552, the Flood broke containment. This has contributed to the monitor's laziness or lax oversight. Somehow, again, it's not clear how, but there is some speculation, the Flood was able to gather enough biomass to create a grave mind. Now, it's really, really important to mention that this had to have happened before humanity and the Covenant show up in November of 2552. How long ago it was is unclear, but it had to have happened before the Battle of Delta Halo, because that battle only lasted a few days, and there's just no way a full Gravemind could have been created with such a short amount of time. In 2551, the human colony of Meridian was glassed, and on its moon, the Covenant found a luminary, possibly the most important luminary in the Covenant's history. We already talked about this once, but this luminary had the location of the Ark, portals to the Ark, but also each halo of the Neoterric Array's location. The Prophet of Regret started hunting, and this would lead him to Earth in October of 2552, not realizing that humanity was there and willing to defend the planet with all we had. Because of this, Regret decides to jump into slipspace to one of the halos, and the In Amber Clad follows. A few weeks later, on November 2nd, 2552, Delta Halo is discovered by both humanity and the Covenant. Immediately, the two forces started fighting each other for control of the ring. The Master Chief and a dozen or so orbital drop shock troopers are sent to secure a landing zone and possibly find the Prophet of Regret, after Cortana realizes that the Prophet of Regret is planning to light the ring. As the Master Chief is closing in on the Prophet, High Charity and its accompanying fleet drop out of slipspace above the ring. Immediately, the Holy City sends help to Regret, but that help is ordered to stand down by none other than the Prophet of Truth, basically ensuring that the Prophet of Regret is killed. The Master Chief goes into a Forerunner temple and kills the Prophet of Regret, and the Covenant starts glassing the area to try and kill the demon, at which time the Chief jumps into a lake where he is taken by the Gravemind. Shortly after this, the newly made Arbiter is sent to find the sacred icon, otherwise known as the Activation Index. To do this, he has to fight his way through the Halo's quarantine zone and ride a gondola towards the library. Unfortunately for him, he's too late, as Miranda Keyes parked the In Amber Clad close by and beat the Covenant to the Index. Johnson and the Arbiter fight, and the Arbiter is helped by Tartarus, who then officially kicks off the Great Schism. All around the ring, the elites get ambushed by brutes and attempt to defend themselves. Elites on the High Council are sent to the auditorium, where they are brutally killed. This happens in the closing chapters of Broken Circle. If you want to know just how brutal and painful the Covenant could be, this is a great resource. Both the Arbiter and the Master Chief are taken by the Gravemind, and the Gravemind tells the pair of them that the Covenant is getting ready to fire the ring. By this time, the Arbiter has already had the seeds of doubt planted into his mind by the heretic leader Sesa Refami. Also, it's not really pertinent to this video, but it is something of importance and a piece of detail that I really, really love. The Arbiter felt such shame and regret for killing Refami that he had his keep join the Swords of St. Helios, which I think is a really, really lovely thing to do for an elite that would never see the result of his cause. But like I said, at this point, Sesa, the Master Chief, Guilty Spark, and now the Gravemind have all told the Arbiter the same thing about the Halo and the Halo's effect, and by now he's pretty convinced. The Gravemind tells them, as the Arbiter already knew, that the Covenant has the Activation Index and they need to work together to get it back. The Master Chief would search one likely location, and the Arbiter would search another. The Chief would be sent into High Charity, where he crashes the announcement to the Covenant. He would then fight his way through the Holy City and just miss Tartarus leaving the city with the Activation Index, Miranda Keyes, and Avery J. Johnson. While he's doing this, however, the In Amber Clad, full of flood, jumps through slipspace into the city. This is another one of those things that I get asked about nearly every single day. The flood was able to take control of the In Amber Clad because it was just left above the library. The flood retains all knowledge of their host, and once they have someone of the bridge crew, they knew how slipspace technology worked. Now, as we all know, at this time, human slipspace technology was very imprecise. However, the Gravemind is basically a god with a near infinite amount of ancient knowledge. So, like how Cortana was able to alter the Covenant slipspace technology to make it faster, more precise, and work in atmosphere above threshold, the Gravemind could have done a similar process to improve human slipspace technology. They enter the city, and it's really a nightmare. They attack the citizenry of the city, as well as those of higher authority. They are able to kill the Prophet of Mercy, and the Prophet of Truth flees to the Anodyne Spirit. The Master Chief fights his way through the flood and is also able to get onto the Dreadnought before it leaves the city and heads to Earth. We'll come back to High Charity in a minute. In the Citadel, the elites are slaughtered, and the brutes take control of the installation. The elites in this area are all called to the Citadel, and it's not actually called the Citadel, but that's what I'm going to call it. It's actually called the Chamber of Consecration by the Covenant. When the elites get there, they are fired upon by a brute named Evictus. There is a high counselor that is taken hostage and an honor guard named Ansu Valenro that is thrown off of this cliff. As soon as the Arbiter is teleported here, he finds a dying elite. The Arbiter picks up Valenro's energy sword and continues forward as this unnamed elite dies, thinking of the Psalm of Repose. With eyes aloft and tensions high, we gain that which we seek. Rejoice in thine keep's battle cry, a song to separate the weak. Of times it walks among us here, the blade comes for us all, but in our stead we claim our dead, when echoed in the hall. Obviously a reference to the god Fide and the Hall of Eternity. The Arbiter fights his way through the Great Schism, with many of the Covenant's aliens siding with the elites here that wouldn't in the greater conflict. The Arbiter comes face to face with Urtas Vadum, and they would fight together to a scarab where Johnson is being held captive. And if you pay close attention here, you can see Johnson climb up onto the scarab. Johnson and the Arbiter then team up to make their way to the Citadel, where the Arbiter confronts Tartarus and tries to make him see reason, but he fails. Using Miranda keys, he activates the ring. Johnson and Thel work together with the elites to fight the brutes and kill Tartarus. Miranda Keys is able to retrieve the activation index, stopping Halo from firing, but putting each Halo into standby mode. We've talked about standby mode extensively at this point, so I'm not going to go into detail about it here. 343 Guilty Spark then explains standby mode and the Ark. Back on High Charity, things are going just about as poorly as they could possibly go. The Flood is running rampant through the city. The Prophet of Truth ripped the city's main power supply out when he took the Dreadnought. There is chaos both in the city as well as outside the city, as the space around the city. The Great Schism is raging throughout that area. Brute ships and elite ships are attacking each other. The elites were able to beat the brutes, and there are even some brute-led ships that ally with the elites for a short period of time here to deal with the Flood. One thing that I haven't mentioned here is that this was a day of celebration in High Charity. When this happens, not only had they just found the activation index, but there was also a San Shayum that was just born. This is a very rare thing. There were parades and fireworks through the streets, and it's generally just a huge celebration and party. The baby's name was a prelate named Tim Batek. That was not here when this happened, but it's important to mention. Urtas Vadum, in the Shadow of Intent, spearheaded the quarantine efforts and partially glassed High Charity in order to try to cleanse it of the Flood. Obviously, they were unsuccessful in doing so. After the war, humanity set up a base that orbits the Halo called Lisbon Station. It watches the ring and studies it from a distance, as it's just too dangerous for people to set up a permanent base on, indicating that the Flood is still active on the ring. By 2558, the UNSC and the Swords of Sanghelios patrolled the Halo and its system, enforcing this quarantine. Delta Halo was also one of the Halos that the researchers were able to corroborate Lutherman and Henry Lamb's story by confirming Delta Halo was doing the exact same thing. Kappa Halo, just like Beta Halo and Epsilon Halo, is another one of those Halos where we just don't have anything about. We don't really know anything about it. Just like the others, it would have been fired 100,000 years ago, been put on standby mode on November 3rd, 2552 by Tartarus, and put into countdown mode by 000 Tragic Solitude. There are a couple things that we do know, however. It's supposed to have both tundra and dense forests. It orbited a planet called Hakuth, and its monitor is called 16807 Abashed Eulogy, which is a name that goes hard as. And that's pretty much all we know about Kappa Halo. half of this video is going to be Zeta Halo. Good lord. Like we talked about earlier, I decided to split the events of Zeta Halo up into its respective arrays, but this is the same Zeta Halo that was used by the Master Builder, the Primordial, and the one that Chakas wandered around on in Primordium. This Halo has now been shrunk down and retrofitted with the new Halo's technology and serves as Installation 07 of the Neoterric Array. It was put into standby mode by Tartarus and stopped by the Chief on the Ark, and was put into a countdown by 000 Tragic Solitude and was deactivated. Not long after the Halos actually fired to cleanse the galaxy, Zeta Halo was home to a few trials. The first one was overseen by Bornsteller, and he held a trial for mendicant bias. The decision was made to keep him alive due to the fact that he had intimate knowledge of the Flood, and that knowledge may one day be useful. Part of him was entombed here, and part of him was sent to the Ark. Sometime after this happened, Zeta Halo was home to another significant event. The Halo was moved to be closer to a newly discovered species, the Endless. They survived Halo's pulse and were brought to the Halo for a meeting in the Silent Auditorium. This is where they were shackled and put into silexes. Zeta Halo was then moved back to its original firing position, where it would stay untouched for 100,000 years. In November of 2553, Zeta Halo was discovered by a scientist named Luther Mann. He found this by looking through Forerunner relics and architecture on sarcophagus, which was once called Onyx and is now called Oni Research Site Trevelyan. In March of 2555, the UNSC sent Luther Mann and Henry Lamb, another scientist, along with about 300 other scientists to Zeta Halo, and this is how they discovered the countdown of the Halo array activated by 000 Tragic Solitude. They were working in this Forerunner facility all day, and as they were wrapping up, they noticed a blinking light. They knew it wasn't blinking all day long, and so it must have just started. He then hears words, and it takes him a moment to realize that it was a countdown from 3 million. They didn't know what this countdown was to, but they could only really assume one thing: activation. In 2558, the Ace of Spades crew came to Zeta Halo in search for the Librarian. The basic gist of what happened here is Ryan Forge, the captain of the Ace of Spades and daughter of Sergeant John Forge, was sent through a slipspace portal to another planet, and the Ace of Spades left Zeta Halo to go searching for her. It's not super important in the Ring's history, but worth mentioning when I make the claim of everything that's ever happened on a Halo. Things really kick off on the Ring again in 2558 when Cortana makes it her base of operations during the created uprising. This is when she would meet Atriox and show him the destruction of Doisak in an event called the Raising of Othsanen. In December of 2559, the Banished were able to get to Zeta Halo first, and in space above the Ring, they were effectively able to disable the human flagship, the UNSC Infinity. In this battle, a lot of things happen. Chief among them is the Master Chief is beaten by Atriox and thrown into space. But before that happens, Lasky deploys the weapon to the Ring from the bridge of the Infinity. The Master Chief escorts Lasky to an escape ship, but he isn't able to get all the way there because the hangar that they're going through is flooded with Banished. He then has Spartan Hudson Griffin escort Lasky the rest of the way. The captain escapes after ordering the rest of the UNSC personnel off of the ship, though Spartan Griffin stays behind for a couple minutes. The UNSC forces that survive this attack take refuge on Zeta Halo, and much like the Battle of Installation 04, Alpha Halo, they are stranded and need to regroup. An engineer named Fernando Esparza on the Infinity was able to procure a Pelican and was successfully able to escape the ship as the Infinity was destroyed or disabled. Still don't know about that. Halo Infinite's audio logs show how Griffin's fire team is able to get to the Ring's surface, and they immediately get to work taking down AA guns. These would be Spartans Griffin, Vittel, Dimka, and Oshiro. They also show how Spartans Makovich and Malik escort drop pods to the surface, as well as Horvath and Intrepid making landfall. Once the Spartans make landfall, Sorel defends his position. Spartan team Taurus, Griffin's Spartan team, is able to take down all 3 AA guns that they set their targets on, just as the Halo Ring sustains heavy damage. Makovich fights Sentinels as the Ring splits apart. Sorel is able to witness the Ring's fracture, and Horvath splits from Intrepid when the Ring breaks apart, which we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about Rubicon Protocol, which we'll start right now. It starts with Spartan Benita Stone holding up a support beam that weighs over a ton, allowing other crewmen and women to escape through the hallway she was literally holding up. Now, as she's doing this, orders are blaring through the Infinity's PA system detailing escape routes, evacuation orders, and life support systems that as of yet have not been destroyed by the Banished. Spartan Nina Kovan is ordered to take out Banished AA guns as soon as she's able to upon landing. And this is when Spartan Benita Stone is able to actually exit the Infinity in her escape pod with another escape pod on her tail, piloted by someone named Murphy. Now, Murphy is somewhat famous when it comes to the Spartans. He himself is not a Spartan, but he was the preferred pilot when it came to dangerous missions by the Spartans. Stone orders Murphy to stay glued to her 6, and they make their way out of the Infinity. Stone comments on how she had not seen this level of destruction since the end of the Human Covenant War. Unfortunately, Murphy's ship is shot down upon re-entry. However, Stone's escape pod was able to make it to the surface and crash-landed. Upon exiting the pod, one of her Marines comments on Halo's geography. He says that with how much destruction these things are supposed to cause, he never expected them to be so beautiful. Back in space, Nina Kovan has entered an ODST-style drop pod and is rocketing towards the surface. She thinks about these 7,000 souls that were either dead now or scattered across the ring. And around here is when her AI plus a fellow Spartan tells her that she is on a collision course with a Phantom. Once she reaches the upper atmosphere of the Halo, she is ordered to correct her course or she would smack into the Phantom, and she smiles and simply says, "Why would I do that? I'm aiming for them." She uses her drop pod as a weapon and crashes through the outer hull of the Phantom. When the door is popped off, she jumps out and she kills a few aliens inside, and she quickly realizes that the ground is coming quickly. She dives back into her drop pod, and the Phantom crashes to the surface. She then kills the rest of the surviving aliens. Now, this whole encounter is a delight to read. It's like icing on the cake because she had been held up and was not able to fight anything on the Infinity. What Spartans were meant to do, what they loved doing, and what they needed to do. And so once that door opened and there were 7 enemy targets, she was absolutely delighted. After this encounter, she was reunited with Spartan Griffin and Fireteam Taurus. Unfortunately, 5 groups of Banished fighters and Banshees were approaching, but this was a Spartan fireteam. They had no shot. Kovan goes on to help a few stragglers as she makes her way to the AA guns that she had been ordered to deal with. 6 hours after falling onto the surface of the Halo, a group that would later be known as the Boat Crew is still trapped inside their Bumblebee escape pod. Inside, the situation is pretty dire. 3 survivors with bumps and bruises, 1 severely wounded survivor, 2 dead, and 2 fell out into space when the escape pod was hit by the Banished. The occupants of this boat were trapped inside. They were able to fashion a makeshift antenna and used a radio to call for help. The one that was severely injured had internal injuries that was just outside anyone's capability at this time to deal with. She couldn't speak and she couldn't move. Really, all she could do is sort of squeeze her hand for a short period of time. She was in really rough shape. Inside this boat was TJ Murphy, Lucas Browning, Isaiah Cameron, Eric Bender, Robin Dimmick, and Gavin Joe. After, like I said, 6 hours of trying the radio, they finally got a response. This is Spartan Tomas Horvath of Fireteam Intrepid responding. Now, if you've watched me for any period of time, really, and you've watched my shorts or my TikToks or whatever, then you probably know that I love Horvath with all of my heart. He is my favorite Spartan 4, and hopefully during this section of the video you'll understand why. The communications go back and forth until Horvath recognizes someone's voice, Murphy's. The escape boat that was piloted by this legendary pilot that was following Stone is this boat. Horvath promises to try and get a lock on their signal and find them, and then they hear a loud booming crash. Spartan Horvath and Fireteam Intrepid made their way toward the escape boat, and Horvath was ordered to go check it out and see if he could help in any way. He made contact again with the boat crew via radio transmission, and they shared some news. When Horvath is less than an hour out, it happens. Horvath feels the ground beneath him shudder, and the ring shears apart. Now, as Horvath is making his way toward the boat crew, 2 very important conversations were happening. One that we see at the end of Halo Infinite, and one that isn't shown in the game. at all. The first one that happens is the one that isn't shown to us. The Didact has bested the Warden Eternal in the domain and has seized control of it. He heads to Zeta Halo to talk to Cortana. Again, this is a conversation that is detailed in my Didact biography video, which there is a link to in the description. The basic gist of this conversation is that Cortana and the Didact were both products of the Gravemind, and Cortana only had one option if she wanted a good outcome. He leaves her with the Forerunner saying, "You are what you dare." As he's leaving, a brute war chief enters the silent auditorium, and this is the conversation that we do see at the end of the game. Atriox taunts Cortana with beating the chief. He tells her that the Banished is here for her, and both of these conversations convince Cortana that she needs to delete herself, she needs to let her copy be, and she needs to deactivate Halo. And she uses a Guardian to damage the ring. This is all really unfortunate timing for the boat crew and Horvath. But it also shows us something really interesting. As soon as a Halo is damaged, it initiates a slip space jump, which means if the Infinity escaped, we still don't know where Zeta Halo is at this point, so the UNSC couldn't send help in these 6 months. That'll change, but it's important to mention. So, Horvath is stranded on one of these islands, and he's actually able to watch the fracture splinter through Halo. He's able to see valleys rise and mountains fall, and the Halo split itself apart. And he makes one desperate call on the radio for anyone who can hear him to take shelter because the ring is fracturing. Now, he has to find his way back to the main structure because both gravity and atmosphere were going to be shut off in a few weeks. Back at the boat crew, they're riding this fracturing of the ring in their boat, and it starts to cave in on itself. The windshield shatters and sends glass through the boat, slicing everyone up. And as they are dealing with this, they hear a heavy thump of armored footsteps. They immediately think of the Banished until a human armored hand punches through the hole and rips a hole in the hull. Then a Spartan helmet appears through the newly torn opening. Spartan Benita Stone was back to save them. They treat their wounds and they start moving. Back on that island, Horvath has come across a phantom with a couple brutes in it. They are pursuing him and they end up crashing after some questionable maneuvering. Now this also severs the island from another, making this situation even more dire. A sentinel also fired upon the phantom and crashed into it. Since that phantom severed ties between the two islands, the island that Horvath was on starts to act erratically, flipping upside down and jumping. This ends up burying Horvath under 9 meters below the surface, with only 90 minutes of air. For the next hour and a half, the Spartan crawls his way out from the debris. He is able to find a phantom and get a surviving brute out, a brute bloodstar named Gorian. After nursing their wounds for a little bit, the pair are able to lift the phantom, releasing the sentinel underneath it and hack it. The pair are then able to jump onto the sentinel and ride their way down to the main structure. Or at least they would have if the pair didn't start fighting. The fight didn't go well for Horvath, as he is stabbed with a shard of the Sentinel and left for dead by Gorian. However, there is this pretty funny moment on the night of December 24th where Horvath throws food at Gorian and says Merry Christmas, and Gorian goes on a long story about brute culture and basically tells Horvath that he's an annoying puppy. But like I said, Horvath is left for dead by Gorian once they make it back to the main Halo structure. Horvath's suit injects biofoam and patches the hole in his armor as he falls unconscious. The boat crew continues to make their way across the ring, losing some Marines and gaining a few members as well. By now, they have been fighting for days and walking day and night. It's been about a week, and we'll cover about up to 2 weeks here. Sitting at a camp and shooting the shit, they are interrupted by a war axe flying through the camp and pinning one of the Marines to a seat. Fighting breaks out. Jackals and brutes invade the camp, and the boat crew mostly takes care of the jackals. This happens at night. They realize that the jackals' eyes reflect the light, and so they can see them, they can't hide, and they shoot and kill the jackals. Spartan Nina Kovan blows one of the brutes' heads off with her sniper, and Stone takes that axe that was thrown through the camp and brings it down on a brute's neck. Shortly after this, they learn about the Mortal Reverie, a Musan-class frigate that crashed onto Zeta Halo. It has food, working showers, barracks, weaponry, and ammunition. This is the Alpha Base equivalent to Zeta Halo. This ship was discovered by Spartan Makovich and liberated in short order. The very next day, the boat crew made their way there, and the first time they saw it, they were struck with the sense of comfort and safety. Maybe now, finally, they'll be safe. Once they get close, the mood of the entire crew dramatically increases. There were other humans with a armored barricade, and so they have this sense of, okay, we're safe now. First, they were assigned a bunk, a shower pass, and some food. After they clean up and eat, they are assigned a job. They're also told that if they have any dog tags from the field, they should go ahead and put them in a specific bin. They look toward this woman's feet and they see just a big bin full of dog tags. Just another reminder of the loss of life here. Once they actually get into the mess, the gravity of their situation starts to dawn on them. Murphy, the pilot, at this point realizes that he had been bottling up his emotions this entire time, and now he's in a situation where at least there's the illusion of safety and he can finally let it out. And he sort of has this moment, a small breakdown where he tries to stop himself from crying. He leans up against the ship's bulkhead for support, and the boat crew comforts him. And this is an unnecessary detail, but it's nice to bring up, but the mess hall was serving up 2 slices of cheese pizza that day. That's not a joke. That's canon. While the crew was having their meal, they heard the name Lasky coming up in conversation somewhere in the mess hall, and they all stop and wonder what happened to the captain, what happened to the ship. Murphy takes a second, and he says that he's going to go get some answers. He had worked so closely with the Spartans, and they all respected him so much and his flying ability so much that getting answers out of them shouldn't be that hard for him. And so he goes off to see if he can leverage his relationship with the Spartans to get some answers. A full month passes, and the boat crew have settled into life at the Mortal Reverie. They're training, they're working, they're eating, and they're sleeping. After 44 days of being stranded on the ring, 4 Spartans, Griffin, Malik, Pinago, and Sarkar, left the Mortal Reverie on a mission to assassinate the banished war chief Escharum. They decided to do this just based on how the banished is actually set up. The banished is made of several groups, different groups working together, but there is this constant infighting and jockeying for Atriox's favor. And with Atriox seemingly out of the picture, Escharum has filled that role. And so if they could get lucky and kill Escharum, the banished on Zeta Halo might devolve into another schism. It's important to mention that in Halo Infinite's audio logs, there is an argument of who would go on this assassination attempt. Each Spartan feeling like they should go. As those Spartans are leaving, Spartan Nina Kovan and Stone talk about their missing teammates. They were part of a team called Fireteam Shadow. It had 2 other members, and they have not been seen since the Infinity. A week after the 4 Spartan squad went out, the personnel of the Mortal Reverie get word back that the assassination attempt failed, and Escharum is going to hit back hard. Griffin makes this transmission himself, letting the Reverie know that all of his Spartans that went with him, Malik, Pinaga, and Sarkar, are dead. Makovich, Vittel, and Kovan receive this transmission and discuss options. Spartan Stone is the first to see them coming, and she reports that an enemy army is amassing, the largest army that she's ever seen, and that they will be at the ship by nightfall. Now, what follows is one of the most heartbreaking and saddening sequences in Halo. The Banished just demolish those at the Mortal Reverie. It happened on January 31st. The Banished would have attacked from this side, and almost immediately the ship's point defense guns started shooting the incoming army. But it didn't take long for the first barricade to fall, then the second. Well, I say didn't take long, and it really didn't in the grand scheme of things, but it did take a couple of days. For 2 days, the battle raged. Gavin Joe of the boat crew was killed by an elite energy sword. Lucas Browning took Joe's collar and drags him. A section of the hull then explodes, and Lucas knew that the fight was over. As the team tried to save Joe, he tells them to leave him behind because he knew that he was done for, and so the boat crew with Spartan Kovan ran and left Gavin Joe behind. The Banished herded survivors towards this, forced them to jump. Those that didn't jump were cut down by plasma, and those who ran were run down by ghosts, wraiths, and choppers. It's an absolute massacre. Those who were able to gain distance were mercilessly pursued. The boat crew ran for hours and hours. Kovan and Stone would split off from the group to kill scouts, and the team would take refuge in a small cave. Once they get there, however, Kovan's armor locks up, and unfortunately the Banished was like right there, and would have found him if it weren't for Lucas Browning. He ran not out of cowardice, but as a lure. He stole one of the banished ghosts that was just sitting there. The entire scouting party runs after him, and he crashes the ghost, and he starts on foot again. Unfortunately, he runs straight into a brute and is taken prisoner. Luckily, however, Escharum gave the order that humans should be taken prisoner at this point and not killed. Once Kovan is able to unlock her armor, she goes back to the Mortal Reverie to scavenge for parts. She returns with food, water, and medical supplies, as well as some arms and ammunition. Lucas Browning is taken to the Redoubt of Sundering, and he is stripped and processed by jackals into human, a banished human. And the very fact that this was a human in the banished sickened Browning. Of the 20 or so people in the holding cells with Browning, he was the only one to survive. The rest were gassed with a blue-green gas in a gas chamber, killing them. For the next several weeks, Lucas Browning watched as people were brought in, inspected, and killed. After 5 weeks, he saw 5 Spartans get brought in. Their armor was torn off of them. They were cut up with knives and pry bars and plasma cutters. Their bodies were then used for target practice. Finally, after a few more weeks, he was taken to the tower. On his first day, he was questioned by Chak Locke, the warden of the tower. Lucas fainted and woke alone in a cell. When Lucas cursed at the disgusting food he was given every couple days, he heard tapping on the cell wall and he leaned against it. His neighbor told him to just eat it, that it wouldn't kill him. The two of them talked about the attack on the Mortal Reverie, and this unnamed neighbor had a particular interest in the Spartans. Those that died, those that survived, and he also refused to tell Lucas who he was. He says that it would be better if Lucas didn't know. In March, the boat crew was still on their own and still traveling the surface of Zeta Halo. This is when this leaderboard is revealed. Since the fall of the Mortal Reverie, the humans on Zeta Halo have taken to keeping in small groups and waging a guerrilla-style war against the Banished, and they were also keeping scores. There was a team of ODSTs called the Grave Diggers, there was another group called Hatriox, and of course the boat crew. There's a really interesting insight here from Murphy, that pilot that the Spartans loved. He realized that today, March 3rd, was the official anniversary of the Human Covenant War's end. For 30 years, humanity fought in this dire situation, and 7 years later, he was right back in the shit. For his entire life, humanity was up against insurmountable odds. The group goes to a forward operating base where they burn bodies, collect dog tags, and scavenge for materials, and listened to Glibnub on the Banished radio. This is when they learn that the surviving Spartans on the ring have enacted the Rubicon Protocol. This is an asset denial protocol, and it basically means that the UNSC forces have carte blanche to do whatever they want to do as long as it poses a strategic defense against the Banished and keeps valuable materials out of the Banished hands. This could be blowing up ammunition supplies, this could be poisoning their water supply, this could be open armed conflict. The UNSC forces on the ring now have authorization to do basically anything. Before this, they were just surviving, but now they're going to be fighting with purpose. Long video, eh? On March 4th, we finally get back to Horvath. He was unconscious for several days after being stabbed. He laid immobile for another week, and after he healed up a bit, he started hunting and scavenging for food and water. And this is when this story gets me pretty emotional pretty much every time I think about it or talk about it or read it. He goes into a cave, and his AI tells him that there was a life signal. He goes inside and he sees this woman in an Oni uniform, and she's in a pretty rough state. Brutes have tortured and beaten her. She's caked with blood and pus. She's basically rotting to death. While she's still alive and she's in this really horrible state, she knows that she's not going to survive. Horvath also knows that she's not going to survive, and after a brief back and forth, Horvath learns that her name is Kate Stalling. He learns that she was part of the original science team that was sent to Zeta Halo, and that they were caught completely off guard when the Banished attacked. He also learns that it was Gorian and Jega Erdamni that tortured her, and she asks him to kill her. And he just can't bring himself to do it. He leaves his sidearm with her, and he leaves the cave, and he sits on a cliff, and he thinks about his heroes. Humanity's heroes. Blue Team. He knows that they were on the Infinity, but he doesn't know what happened to them. And then he hears a gunshot, and then he buries Kate. The boat crew is still doing well by day 125. They come across these huge methane tanks or methane bubbles that sort of act as artificial habitats for grunts to walk around in and walk freely in without their methane tanks. These grunts had regular shift changes where for a brief period of time there's about double the amount of grunts in this area, and methane is highly flammable. So to start, Kovan cracks one with her sniper rifle as the boat crew sets off explosives, and this whole grunt camp goes up in a brilliant explosion. They actually dug dugouts underneath boulders, and so they get back into the boulder and put dirt on top of them because they knew that if they ran, they would be caught. And so they stay hidden for 24 hours as the Banished search for them. Finally, the Banished gave up and went back to their base, and the boat crew moved on. The next day, Kovan was looking through her sniper scope, and she saw a glint of another sniper looking at her, scope to scope, like they're looking at each other across a chasm like this. And she realizes that it's a Spartan. And for the first time after leaving the reverie, Spartan Kovan and Stone see each other. These are two people who have been together for 10 years, over 10 years. They were part of the first class of Spartans. God damn it, I'm gonna fucking get emotional again. Kovan is signaled to stay put as Stone makes her way to her. Once they meet up, they talk about how there had been a significant Banished presence moving north, and they come to the conclusion that they're going to make their way back north to the mortal reverie as well. Lucas Browning, the prisoner that sacrificed himself in order to save the boat crew, is on one of these transports heading north. He notices the change in temperature as they're heading north, and he also comes to the conclusion that the Banished didn't want him dead. If they wanted him dead, he would have been dead a long, long time ago. He notices that at this point, it seems like he's being kept alive for some purpose. He just doesn't know what that purpose is, but that will become clear very soon to him. He gets taken into a cave system underneath the mortal reverie where he comes face to face with the Banished war chief Escharum, and they use him to open the Silex that housed the Harbinger. She asks the war chief who they are, and Escharum responds that they are the Banished, and he asks her who she is, and she says that she is the Harbinger, and she says, all that you know will be undone, and Escharum just responds with, good. The Harbinger then looks at Lucas, recognizes him as a human, and says that she is now the owner of him. She takes ownership of him, and that this one will be mine, basically. About 5 or 6 days after this happens, the boat crew shows up at the mortal reverie in order to scout out what's going on. As Spartan Stone is looking into the outpost, Outpost Tremonius, as it's called now, it doesn't take very long for her to notice a few things. First, the Banished has tunneled underneath and is excavating Forerunner artifacts. And second, she notices a human, a barefoot, skinny, and a shell of what he was before, but she recognizes him as Lucas Browning. She opens up a transmission and tells anyone who could listen that half of the Banished forces are leaving and going towards something called the Conservatory. She then meets up with Kovan and tells her the news about Browning, and the two start working on a plan to save him. Stone would keep watch with her sniper rifle, and Kovan would activate her active camo module and infiltrate the base. With Stone on overwatch, Kovan was able to make her way to Browning with very little trouble. Almost none, actually. She did a quick scan of him to learn that he had multiple broken bones, had torn multiple ligaments, and was actively starving. He may have also been suffering from sleep deprivation. Once he realized who Kovan was, he started crying. And goddammit, it's going to get me again. And he explained to her that if he left, he wouldn't survive. And he shows her that he has shackles on, shackles placed on him by the Harbinger. Browning then cemented himself as a hero again by telling Kovan that this is all bigger than the Banished, this is bigger than the war chief, this is bigger than him, and he encourages her to leave him behind. Oh, shit. She didn't want to leave him behind, but he tells her that she has to and that he has to stay. And so she gives him a couple of recorders with transmitters attached to him, as well as a tracking beacon. Browning then does again the heroic thing. It's important... Oh, fuck. It's important to remember here that Browning had been tortured for months at this point, and he's looking up at this Spartan, who's supposed to be like the pinnacle of what it is to be a human. He reassures her. God, I love this book. He smiles at her and tells her that everything's going to be okay, that it's okay. That it's okay that she'll be leaving him behind. He asks if his sacrifice was worthy. He asks if everyone got away, and then Kovan takes off her helmet, determined to give him like one final human moment. And she smiles back. I haven't talked about it yet. Kovan is called the Stoic. That's her nickname for the Spartans. She's earned that nickname because like she shows no emotion. Nothing gets to her. She barely ever smiles. She's just stone-faced through everything. But she breaks that and smiles at him to give him that one last human moment. And she tells them that they all made it, and the people that he saved are still alive today, and only because of him. If it weren't for him, they would have all died. And now I'm crying over a silly video game I played as a kid. She also tells him that she'll come back for him, and she gives him that tracking beacon and recording devices, and this would be the prisoner audio logs in Halo Infinite. The next day, he's taken back to the tower, and he has a brief conversation with his neighbor, who, again, he doesn't know. Stone is able to get inside Outpost Tremodius and make her way underneath it. She sees the Silex that house the Harbinger, and then rides this elevator down into the Forerunner facility below, and she picks up a UNSC signal and decides that she needs to investigate further. She also has an encounter with the Skimmers. She tries not to fight them because they're not fighting her, and she doesn't know what they are, but they end up tracking her as she runs through this Forerunner architecture. She tries to set a trap for them, but they don't pursue, and this is when she runs into Jega Erdamni, and she watches as they use a human to access a Forerunner console, and then that human is executed by Jega. Stone also hears what information they got from the console, the Halo's defense systems and the ring's location. Remember, it was moved when it was damaged by Cortana, and if the Banished had access to the ring's defense systems, the UNSC presence on the ring wouldn't stand a chance of survival. So Stone had to act. She makes her presence known by throwing 2 grenades and putting her shoulder into a brute, and those grenades kill a grunt, a jackal, and she kills that brute as well. Gorian and Jega pull their weapons. Gorian shoots a Hydra at her and she dodges it. Then the Blade Master and the Bloodstar get on Ghosts and hightail it away. And Stone gave chase. She was able to get on a plasma cannon and strike Gorian's ghost, which disables it, at least for a short time, and it throws the brute to the ground. Jega stopped and turned around, barked an order at Gorian, and then gunned his ghost toward her, weaving in and out, dodging her plasma fire. Stone then charges the ghost, weaving back and forth, dodging Jega's plasma fire, and then Jega dips the nose of his ghost and it catches a ledge, and then it slingshots him toward Stone. She dodges it and Jega taunts her. She shot at him and he turned on his active camo, disappearing. She did the same and tracked his generator. Before she could find him, he sliced the plasma cutter in 2. She took out 2 M6 pistols and fire, but Jega was just too fast, and so she gets behind cover, behind the crashed ghost, and he still attacked. She was able to sweep his feet and then jump on top of him. She beats him down and attacks his prosthetic arm and ripped out that data module. She then slid it into her forearm port, and her AI Uso copied the data and corrupted the module. Her struggle with Jega ripped up her shoulder muscles as the elite was rising. She threw a grenade at him and then shot it, blowing Jega into a chasm. Then she was rammed by Gorian's ghost, pinning her to a wall. The Bloodstar grabs her head. He reaches over and grabs her head and starts banging it into the ghost. She fights against him with all her might, and her AI gave her a boost of adrenaline, and she's able to actually jump over him and force the two of them out of the ghost, coming to rest in this room. She bolted deeper into the facility, killing some aliens as she went, and she killed a brute captain named Hectarius. Finally, plasma sliced through her spine and her abdomen as Jega Erdamni returned, taunting her as she died. They took the now corrupted data module, and blackness took Spartan Stone. Lucas Browning is taken from the tower and is sent to the Harbinger, where the two have a short conversation. Not actually, though. In fact, she quotes the Gravemind and tells Lucas that she shall talk and he shall listen. She also feeds him, giving him food and water, and he tries to take him down slowly, but he's starving at this point, so he gorges himself until she cuts him off. And they finally begin to have their conversation. But we aren't really told what is said. There is some of it in the prisoner Halo Infinite audio logs. It's been a couple days since the boat crew last saw Spartan Stone, and they're pretty worried about it. Kovan had her suspicions, but she didn't tell the rest of the team, and this is when she tells them about Browning, shocking them all. The crew then splits up as tempers get pretty hot. Once they're cooled down, however, they went to the Reverie and have a look over things, and of course by now Browning was gone and Stone was dead, but they're able to get inside and they make their way underground, and they find Stone's body. Now we have to remember that this is the Spartan that saved them from their boat way back at the beginning of this conflict. This is the Spartan that saved them countless times since then, and there she was, dead. There's this time of mourning for the boat crew. Kovan was able to take Stone's data, but they were in this banished base and the enemy was on their way, so they had to leave, and they leave Stone's body there. They head deeper into the Forerunner system and retrace Stone's steps, finding a monitor who quickly lets her feelings be known about the banished. She says that the enemy of the banished is a friend of mine, and she also confirms Cortana's death. The conversation then turns to the data that Stone retrieved, and the monitor tells them what the data is and how they can use it. By now, Spartan Horvath has made his way into a Forerunner facility following the map that Kate Stalling gave him. He finds himself in this weird lake of dried oil and pitch, and he runs to the center of it, and at the center is an elevator that takes him underground. While he's going underground, his AI tells him that it's picking up a Spartan signature and a total of 5 human signatures in this underground facility, and I'm sure you already know where this is going. Horvath finally, for the first time since being split up from his fire team when the Halo was fractured, he finds humans. He finds the boat crew. Had to run to catch up to them, and his heart leaps out of his chest, not with the strain of having to sprint after them, that's really nothing for a Spartan, but just with pure hope of finally meeting his kind again after basically 6 months of strife, injury, and travel. The two Spartans meet each other, they take off their helmets, and again, I get emotional every time I read this because Horvath laughs in relief, and Kovan actually tears up a little bit because she had just learned that she lost one of her Spartans, her friend Spartan Stone, and as if out of nowhere, another Spartan shows up. And to me, it just really goes to show the bond between Spartans, the bond that Spartans have with each other. Only a Spartan knows what it's like to be a Spartan, what it's like to be the ones that everyone looks up to. And really, it's just a beautiful moment of two people grieving with each other over their lost comrades and the joy of seeing each other again. One thing that this reminds me of, and again, it's not something that is pertinent to this story, but it's something that I get emotional about when I read it, and I read this thing over and over and over again. And this video is already a couple hours long at this point, so I might as well talk about it, is The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. Dante is guided through hell and purgatory by Virgil, an ancient poet that was a pagan, and basically all that means is he wasn't alive by the time Jesus Christ came around, and he wasn't alive to believe him, so he will never have the chance to go into heaven, basically. And I know this is a weird tangent to go on, but just Hear me out. There's this part at the very end of Purgatory where Dante has to go through a searing fire, and it's painful, but it's worth it because on the other side is paradise. And Virgil, since he was a pagan, he knows he'll never be allowed into paradise, but no matter what, he decides that he's going to go through the fire as well. He's going to experience the pain. He's going to burn, literally burn, basically with Dante so that Dante doesn't have to do it alone, because Dante's scared. And so he experiences this fire with Dante, and to me that just sort of summarizes the Spartan's nature. Only they have walked through that fire of becoming a Spartan. I know it's a weird tangent to go on, but it's just something that I think about very frequently when I read Halo stuff, specifically Spartan stuff. Now, Kovan and Horvath give each other a hug, and they talk about the dire situation that their armor is in, and after that brief reunion, there is a reunion between Horvath and Murphy. The two recognize each other. Again, they've grown beards, their hair's long, it's been 6 months. And he recognizes Murphy as this legendary pilot and friend of the Spartans, and Horvath realizes that Murphy is the one that was calling Horvath for help way back when he called for help in the boat. And Spartan Horvath was the Spartan that was supposed to come and save them. Of course, Halo split up and he wasn't able to do that. Murphy introduces Horvath to the rest of the boat crew, to their would-be savior had things gone differently, and of course, their actual savior was Benita Stone, who was dead a couple rooms back. One thing that I think is important to mention here is Horvath asked about Lucas Browning because he never forgot about the promise he made to the person that he talked to that was from the same homeworld to him. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but the second time that Horvath made contact with him, he talked to Browning, and they talked about their shared homeworld. And when the news hit him, he was pretty shaken up by it, and then Horvath told the boat crew the story about the Bloodstar, and when he mentioned the Bloodstar's name, Gorian, of course, Kovan knew that name as the brute who aided in Stone's death, and so there's a little conversation there about Gorian. The group then made their way to the conservatory where they talk about the mortal reverie. Remember that this is the first time Horvath is hearing about any of this stuff, and once they're done, Horvath tells them his story, and this is where the crew came up with the plan to use a beacon tower to transmit Halo's coordinates back home to Earth, where the UNSC could muster some sort of defense and bring the cavalry, so to speak, to Zeta Halo. Back at the tower, Lucas Browning is going through a sort of mental and emotional breakdown, and he had been starved for months at this point. His conversations with the Harbinger are not aiding in his mental health at all. Again, we don't get great insights onto how those conversations went, but they are mentally wearing down Browning. He starts to say, I can't do it, getting louder and louder and louder until his neighbor reassures him. He tells Browning to take deep breaths. He tells Browning that he can do it. One thing that really strikes me about Browning is that he's only 25 years old. At the time of recording, I'm 25 years old. And I'll probably have my birthday by the time this video comes out because I've been recording for like 4 hours now. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. I'll probably be 26 when this comes out, but still, I just can't imagine going through all of this insane stuff at the age of 25. I mean, Browning really is a hero. This would break anyone, but a young man like this, who isn't even really a soldier, he's a civilian contractor, but I just think that's something important to mention. Also around this time, Spartan Vittel scouts out the tower and decides that he's going to rescue Spartan Griffin from the tower. Browning's neighbor tells him that every day they survive is another day closer to freedom. However, Browning sees this another way. Every day survived is another day closer to death, and he wonders how his neighbor could stay so positive during this time. His neighbor was the warden's favorite torture subject. Lucas was pretty sure that the warden was literally killing this guy, then bringing him back to life to torture him all over again, and his neighbor tells him that the situations can turn on a dime, and they never know who is going to burst through the doors and save them. And we'll talk about it when we get there, but I'm sure you already know where that part's going. Lucas tries to tell his neighbor what's been happening with him and the Harbinger, but for some reason he just can't get the words out. Like, he tries to tell him, but he can't. He doesn't know why, and he freaks out for a little bit about it, wondering what the Harbinger has done to him and what is keeping him from telling his neighbor what's going on, what's stopping him from being able to speak about their encounters. The bridge crew is able to make their way inside the conservatory before the Banished are able to turn on their mining laser that force their way in, and they make a direct route here where they're able to find Despondent Pyre. Now, they're able to wake her up, and she's kind of tired. She doesn't seem motivated to do very much, and they tried to get it to allow them to use the Halo's communications relay, and it says no. And then they speak about the Harbinger, and this seems to wake her up a little bit more. She resets the beacon tower, and she gives Kovan a key for the beacon towers, and they leave without their sub-monitor, who had been guiding them this entire time. They're teleported away from the conservatory and right to a beacon tower that was unfortunately occupied by the Banished. They're able to get inside and send the signal, but not without losing one of their own. Murphy sacrifices himself to block an elite from firing on the control panel, diving in front of the plasma that hits his chest, and it eats its way through his body and severs his spine. Another one of those reasons why I say that plasma's heavily nerfed in the games. Back on the surface, Horvath watches as a brute Bloodstar jumps from a Phantom, and of course this was Gorian. Those inside the beacon tower left without Murphy, and Horvath knew exactly why. Kovan then told Horvath to go deal with Gorian and show no mercy. There's then this really amazing moment where everyone in the boat crew is offering up something to Horvath. They gave him a grenade here, or a weapon here, or ammo here. Everyone gives him something. Bender gives him an energy sword that he picked up from a dead elite. They know who he's going to fight, and so they all pitch in to help just a little bit. Then Horvath goes to face Gorian one final time. No matter what, one of them is going to die here, Gorian or Horvath, so this is the final time. Gorian tells Horvath that he only was allowed to live in order to experience the full might of his fists, and he calls Horvath a pup again, and then he asks Horvath if he is ready to die, and they get to work. Horvath shoots first, and Gorian returns fire. Each brute shot grenade missed, but every now and again they would get close enough to knock Horvath off of his feet. He's knocked to his back, and when he gets up, Dimmick is there. She, for some reason, is right there in front of him, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" She hands out a spike grenade for Horvath, and then he takes it, and she runs back. Horvath continued running up the hill, dodging brute shot grenades as he went. He then primed the grenade that Dimmick gave him and threw it between the brute's feet, and it knocked the brute's shields out, and once Horvath found his footing, he makes his way back to Gorian, where he notices that Dimmick has been pinned down. Horvath, with his carbine at a full sprint, places 2 shots with the carbine into the jackals, killing them, and then Gorian charges him and tackles Horvath. Horvath punches Gorian where he knew he had injured ribs back from the Phantom crash, and then an energy sword, the energy sword that Bender gave Horvath, flares to life, cutting through the brute, and he fell dead. While all of that was happening, the boat crew was dealing with a Wraith and an incoming Banished force. This is really, really close to the conservatory where they knew that a significant Banished force was. Cam got shot. Kovan shot a missile out of the air. Kovan was then able to confirm that Cam had died, and she drags him back to the beacon tower. Horvath watches Kovan get hit as this brute has fallen on him, and he tries to get up and help, but a slip space portal opens around him and he's teleported somewhere away, so he cannot help. Around this time, the Banished were able to get into the conservatory, and Spartans Makovich and Sorel follow them inside, where they are attacked by Jega or Domni. Sorel is severely wounded and makes his last stand with a screwdriver, killing many Banished soldiers, but ultimately succumbing to Hyperius and Tavares. By now, Lucas Browning seems to have been fully driven mad. He keeps repeating phrases like empty space and so old, and repeating numbers, a number sequence. Here he has a brief conversation with the Harbinger that tells him that humans were once the Forerunner's rivals a very, very long time ago, and now the Endless are going to come back. 4 days after the fight at the Beacon Tower, Kovan, Bender, and Dimmick have survived, and the two are helping Kovan with her incredibly damaged armor. They all had terrible injuries. They had lost 2, Murphy and Cam, and they didn't know if Horvath won or lost because they just saw him get tackled by that brute and then he got teleported away. But they got the data away, and right as hope had seemingly been lost, the sub-monitor that helped them earlier came to help again, successfully gathering the survivors and moving them away. They reflected on their mission, hoping that someone had heard their message. They decide that they're going to find Lucas Browning and liberate the tower. 11 days after the Beacon Tower battle, Horvath is walking on this snow-ridden mountain after having thrown Gorion's body off the top. He made his way down and was able to find a dropship that had slammed into the mountain, leaving no survivors, but it had a week's worth of food and water, as well as weapons and ammunition. Again, he was all alone, hoping to find someone, and so he sent out this message to any UNSC
personnel in range. This is Spartan Thomas Horvath, Fire Team Intrepid, and I appear to be alone. I am heading upspin, beyond the reach of the banished, to search for survivors. For my fire team. I don't know what else to do. The silence on UNSC channels is not encouraging. But I will be listening, watching, surviving. Chief, if you can hear this, we need you, now more than ever.
He then closes the transmission again, and I always get emotional when I think about this part because he thinks about the Master Chief. And now if anyone can save them at this point, it's Sierra 117, and his prayers would be answered. Spartan Horvath makes this transmission on the 25th of May, 2560. 3 days later, on the 28th, the engineer that was able to escape the Infinity picked up a signal. After clearing his windshield, he realizes that it's Spartan 117. The Master Chief, floating comatose in space. Something that I should mention here, we know that the Halo moved when Cortana damaged it, and that happens right after the Master Chief is thrown into space. And so it seems like when the Halo entered slip space, much like the Prophet of Regret's ship was able to kind of sucked a bit of New Mombasa with it as it went into slip space, that must have happened here, and the Halo sucked in debris, smaller craft around the Halo, as well as the Master Chief to wherever it sits now. Esparza is able to get the Chief into the Pelican that he escaped on and had been living on for the last 6 months. He kind of gambles everything on the Chief. His power was running dangerously low, and he used what little he had left to jumpstart the Chief's armor, and the gamble pays off. The ship jumps the suit back to life, and the suit powers the Pelican back up. The two have a brief conversation on the battle and what has been going on in the last 6 months, and then the Pelican is seized by the warship Bracken. I always say Bracken as the G gotta be silent there because I don't know how to say that. The pilot gives the Chief a pistol with 1 round in it, and then he jumps out of the Pelican and gets some more weapons and ammunition. He then fights through a few grunts, and then he comes up against a berserker. He's able to get to the bridge where he sees Eshram giving an address to the Banished, stating that the ring will be under the Banished control within hours, and then the Chief talks about Atriox for a few moments, and then Eshram recognizes the Chief. The Spartans' legend wasn't only with humans, it had spread throughout all the races of the galaxy. The Chief scuttles the ship, and as he was escaping, Eshram continued to taunt him as he left. The Master Chief and Esparza in his Pelican are able to leave the ship separately, but the pilot grabs the Chief after the fact. The Chief then looks for UNSC FOF tags, and he finds that none of them are active or alive of the over 1,600 tags in proximity. He has the Pelican go down into the substructure of the ring where he finds the weapon, and while that happens, Tremonius is absolutely embarrassed. The Chief retrieves the weapon, and she actually urges him to delete her, and he tells her no, that he'll need her help to beat the Banished. He takes her to a data module left over from Cortana, and the Chief sees data that shows him the first time the Chief met Cortana. He continues finding his way through the facility, and he comes across Benita Stone's body, where he's able to pick up an upgrade module from her. He finds an elevator that leads out of the facility and is able to turn it on, and when he does this, it drops the brute that led the attack on the Mortal Reverie, Tremonius. He is able to kill Tremonius, and he goes to the surface to liberate the Mortal Reverie. For the first time since the attack that killed so many humans that thrust the boat crew into the wilderness to fend for themselves, the ship was once again under human control, just days after the boat crew was there to find Stone. The Chief calls the pilot in, and he introduces him and the weapon, and from here the Master Chief heads to the tower. On the way, the weapon asks why they were sent after Cortana. It seems that she wasn't given all of the information, and he tells the weapon that Halsey only tells people what they need to know. The pilot has a hard time getting to the tower as he's unable to land super close to it, but he gets the Chief close enough. But on the way there, they are able to take control of the forward operating base, FOB Gulf. Once he gets there, he's able to fight his way through the walls, where he is met with a hologram of the warden, Chak Lok, who locks the facility down and sends more banished forces to fight him. The chief clears them out and is able to break the lockdown procedure and enters the tower and finds a sensor module, and he also finds Spartan Hudson Griffin's armor. The chief then works his way up to the tower and kills Chak Lok, and he helps Spartan Griffin out of the torture chamber, and Griffin tells the chief about the conservatory, and then he dies and tells the chief that he has to save the rest of the Spartans. And I told you I would talk about this earlier. It's never revealed who Lucas Browning's neighbor is. We never actually know who's the person that was Chak Lok's favorite torture subject and the one who helped Browning get through everything, but I think it's very clear that it's Hudson Griffin. And Griffin talked about how you never know who is going to burst through those doors and how a situation can turn on a dime, and now it has. And the Master Chief burst through those doors and let Griffin die with dignity. Once the chief gets to the conservatory, they find another dead Spartan, Spartan Makovich, killed by the same energy blade that killed Stone. They continue through the conservatory and they meet Despondent Pyre, who is attacked by skimmers. They talk about the skimmers being new and dangerous and how this monitor may be dangerous. As they go, they are ambushed by cloaked elites, but the chief is able to work his way through them. As he's doing this, the Harbinger seems to be breaking down the monitor. When they get to the monitor, it's in this weird deconstructed state. This is where they see a recording of Cortana talking to the monitor about the Endless. Now, it's my theory that Cortana left these recordings for the chief to find, basically, to fill in him on what has been going on. The weapon is able to unlock something, and she talks about how Cortana was here 6 months ago, and the pair move on to find Spartan Sorel, who was killed in the same way Makovich was, or at least injured in that way, and then killed by the two brutes. They continue through the conservatory and fight two brute captains. They then ride an elevator to the surface, and they meet the Harbinger, who throws the Master Chief like a rag doll out of the conservatory, but not before showing that she had taken some component from Despondent Pyre. Now, they don't tell us what it is at the time, but it's the monitor's encephalon, basically giving her control of the ring's systems. Now, outside of the conservatory, the chief sees a spire activate, and he heads there, fighting two hunters at its base to gain entry. They are then found by a sub-monitor, and they tell him that Despondent Pyre is gone, and he leads them through the spire to a control node where the weapon realizes that the spire and those like it aid in the repair of the ring. Once they show a little bit of hostility towards the ring itself, the sub-monitor turns hostile, and the chief is able to beat it. They then shut down the spire, and the weapon is able to find 10 other spires. Now, instead of finding these 10 other spires, they decide that they're going to go to the source. Once they take this spire offline, they have to jump. Luckily, the pilot was there to catch them and his Pelican. Unfortunately, the Pelican is then shot down by AA guns. The Master Chief is then able to take down the AA guns, and the pilot searches for a Condor with a working slipspace engine, but he is unsuccessful in doing so. At each of the AA guns, he is given a little talk by Escharum, who tells him that the UNSC is hunted by the Banished and that they are going to the Silent Auditorium next. He also tells the chief that he really wants to fight the Master Chief, that without a fight, Escharum has grown weary, and that this is his final fight to cement his legend for generations to come. In the next gun, Escharum asks Chief if he feels the loss of the Spartans. He talks about Atriox, and he talks about why he created the Hands of Atriox, the Spartan Killers. On the way to the next gun, they are given a transmission by Hyperius, who aided in the deaths of many Spartans throughout the ring. After taking care of the 3 AA guns, they make their way back to receive a transmission that had been broadcast across all banished frequencies saying, "Hand of Atriox, deploy." They then come against Hyperius and Travaris, who the Master Chief is able to kill, and even says that it was easy, which is pretty crazy. They go on to find the pilot, and this is where the pilot tells the chief that he is not actually, in fact, a pilot, but a civilian engineer. The chief comforts him and tells him about the chief's own failings. This gave Fernando a new vigor, and he's ready to fight. The Banished realizes that the Spartan killers have been killed, at least Travaris and Hyperius, and the Harbinger starts giving tactical advice. The Harbinger tells Escharum that the command spire must be protected, and Escharum sets up some fortifications. Escharum tells Jega to find a way to bring the Master Chief to the House of Reckoning alive. The Chief and the weapon make their way to the command spire where they are unable to gain entry. They have to make their way to a few beacon towers to create a signal that would be able to break them into the command spire. In the first tower, the weapon is optimistic, but she isn't able to construct the full sequence, so they have to continue to more. On the way to the second beacon tower, the pilot asks the Master Chief why he does this, and does he have anyone? And the Master Chief says that no, he doesn't really have anyone, and he does this because it's basically all he knows. In the second beacon tower, the weapon is able to come to the conclusion that they need 2 other beacon towers, and she starts acting a little odd. In the third beacon tower, she really runs into trouble. Something pushes against her and scans her, and she thinks it's probably some sort of security protocol. Finally, in the fourth beacon tower, something of substance happens. The weapon finds that this has all been a trap, and the Harbinger has been using the weapon to break the protocol to jumpstart the ring's repair. Chief also starts the deletion process with the code word red flag, just in case something were to happen. Finally, they are able to enter the command spire where they hear cryptic messages from Cortana. They kill a couple hunters and head deeper into the facility and ride a gondola to the Nexus where they talk about the grandeur of Halo and the trust between the two of them, the weapon and the Chief. The Chief continues to have that deletion protocol ready, and they hear Cortana's speech at the beginning of Halo 3, and they hear Captain Keyes at the beginning of Halo CE. The Master Chief talks about the first Halo, how he destroyed it, and how he lost a lot of good people there. He then watches the end of Halo 4, where Cortana dies. The weapon then gets got by the Harbinger. The Harbinger talks directly to the Chief. The weapon tries to fight back, but the Chief tries to delete her, but she actually stops her own deletion, breaking her trust in the Chief. She then reveals that she was able to steal the Encephalon that the Harbinger took from Despondent Pyre. They make their way up the spire, where they learn that the Reformation is focused on the Silent Auditorium, and they go further into the spire where they run into Adjudicant Resolution again, and again they have to fight him. After him, they are attacked by 3 Phantoms, and finally they are able to shut down the command spire, halting the repair of the ring. They have an argument about the deletion stuff, and at this point she doesn't know she's a copy of Cortana, and this is when Fernando is attacked by Gyre Domni, and they go after him. They go through a portal to the repository. Fernando is taken to the House of Reckoning, and the Chief sees the conversation between Captain Keyes and Halsey about Cortana. Then he hears Cortana's address to the galaxy as they learn where they are. They are then shown Fernando is being tortured by the Banished. Also, in this mission, if you come here, you can see the elites that ambush you later in the mission. I think that's a cool detail. In the repository is when the Chief sees Laconia Station being blown up. In this act, Cortana kills 76 Spartans. They also see Earth being attacked by the Guardians, specifically Sydney. They also see Atriox refuse the created terms, and they watch her destroy Dorsac and the raising of Oth-Sonnen. The weapon and the Master Chief talk about how the Chief thinks that all of this is his fault. This is also when the weapon realizes that she is a copy of Cortana, and she has an emotional moment, and she realizes what she was. She reactivates the deletion protocol and pleads with the Chief again to delete her, in which he refuses. Again, he'll need her help. The Chief, with the help of a tank, is able to make his way through the Banished fortifications to the House of Reckoning. He heads inside to find 3 different levels of tests, one being Gyre Domni, who Chief is able to kill. We'll learn more about that in a month. Also, this video is going to be out of date in a month or so when Edge of Dawn comes out. I'm sure we'll talk about it on the channel. During these 3 levels, Eshram continues to taunt the Master Chief, bringing up past battles and even the Infinity, saying it only took 4 minutes for the Infinity to fall. Finally, Eshram and the Chief meet. 4 times he activates a shield that whatever damage is inflicted on the shield is given to Fernando. Destroying the 4 relays deactivates the shield, and the Chief kills Eshram, showing respect to a fallen soldier as he dies. The team leaves the House of Reckoning and heads to the Silent Auditorium. The weapon reveals that the Silent Auditorium is where Cortana died. This is also where they see Atriox talk to Cortana. He tells her that he threw the Chief into space and crushed his skull. Of course, the Chief survived this, and here he is to stop the Banished and the Harbinger. Working through the auditorium, they run into the Sub-Monitor again, who this time helps them. They make their way into the auditorium where they kill the Harbinger. who talks to an unknown entity. Cortana then gives her final goodbye to the Master Chief, a message that she recorded before she deleted herself 6 months prior, and the team is teleported. Curiously, it took 3 days for them to exit the portal, while it was pretty much instant for them. And that is the last information we know about Zeta Halo. Of course, like I said a few minutes ago, this video will be out of date in about a month, probably less than a month by the time this video comes out. But again, we'll cover it when we get there. Installation 08 was the replacement to Installation 04 Alpha Halo. After the Master Chief destroyed it in September of 2552, the Ark immediately got to work on building a replacement. Only 3 months after this event, this replacement was ejected from the Ark by the Master Chief himself. Pretty much nobody knew about this or knew that it was happening. Nobody knew that the Ark was going to spit out a new Halo to replace the one that was damaged. Not even 343 Guilty Spark. He had a hunch, but he didn't have concrete evidence. He didn't have confirmation that this was actually going to happen until he saw it for himself. Now, right after this happens, the Master Chief has the idea that he should light the new Halo, because lighting this new Halo could kind of solve all the problems that were happening at the Ark at this time. And so the plan was concocted, and everyone who survived the Battle of the Ark got onto the Shadow of Intent and traveled back to Earth. Of course, Johnson, Arbiter, and the Master Chief would stay behind to light the ring, and then use the Forward Unto Dawn to travel back through the portal to Earth. Now, for this plan to work, a few things have to be true. This plan makes absolutely no sense if the Flood is not killed by Halo. And I think that this is where a very big misconception comes from. On Alpha Halo, Cortana says that the Halo array does not kill the Flood. It kills their food, but killing its food also kills the Flood, right? Killing its host also kills the Flood. Like, take this combat form, for example. This cannot survive without its host, and so killing its host kills the Flood. Again, this wouldn't wipe out all of the Flood, but Halos are supposed to be able to kill anything more complex than a bumblebee, and so the single-cell organisms of the Flood would survive. And so when the Master Chief comes up with this plan to light Halo, he's doing so under the understanding that it will kill the Covenant on the Ark and the Flood, at least on its surface, because the Ark is supposed to shield those within it. So Johnson, the Arbiter, and the Master Chief make their way to this new Halo, Installation 08. They are pretty much immediately confronted by the Flood that try to stop them. Luckily, however, they are able to get into the control room and light the Halo. However, there was a hiccup. 343 Guilty Spark, as we all know, has an ownership problem. Once something is his, he wants to protect it with all of his might, and this was the replacement to his Halo, and so he wanted to protect it as much as he could. So when Sergeant Johnson tries to light Installation 08, 343 Guilty Spark, knowing that this act would destroy the Halo, turns hostile towards the group and ends up killing Avery J. Johnson. The Master Chief is able to, with Johnson's help, dispatch the Monitor and finally destroy it, or at least as far as the Master Chief is concerned, destroy it, and then he lights the Halo, leaving Johnson's body behind, and the Arbiter and him are able to escape on the Forward Unto Dawn. Unfortunately, Halo's pulse closes the portal on the Ark, and so only half of the ship makes it to Earth, and the other half is stranded in space. It's also important to mention that the Gravemind was trying to rebuild itself on Installation 08, as we see, or as Cortana tells us, during that mission. Installation 09, just like Installation 08, was a replacement. However, this one's a replacement to the replacement of Alpha Halo. So, Alpha Halo was destroyed, Installation 08 was its replacement, and then it was destroyed by the Master Chief when it was prematurely fired. And since then, the Ark has been working on a replacement to Alpha Halo's replacement, and that's Installation 09. Now, this installation is spit out by the Ark in 2558 during the second Battle of the Ark, really the third Battle of the Ark. Pretty much as soon as it gets spit out by the Ark, the battle intensifies between the UNSC forces and the Banished. However, Dr. Anders is able to use the ring's defense systems to eject it, or eject portions of it into space to help in that cause. Now, one thing that I mentioned about the Halo array earlier on is that once they are made, or once one is spit out, it pretty much immediately is sent into slip space, and that's exactly what happened here with Dr. Anders on board. It doesn't happen to Installation 08 because Installation 08 was still being built, whereas Installation 09 came out of the forge pretty much fully intact and ready to go. If Installation 08 came out of the Ark fully intact, the Chief may not have had time to get onto it and light it before it left. Like I said, it enters slip space with Dr. Anders on it, and this is when one of the biggest cliffhangers in Halo that has not been rectified yet happens. On the journey from the Ark to the galaxy, it is pulled out of slip space prematurely. Anders wanders to the surface, and this is when she is met by a Guardian. But with that, that is every single thing that has ever happened on a Halo. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully I'm able to get this done in time for my trip to Seattle, because I want to make a Seattle trip video because we're going there for HCS Worlds. And so I'll see you then. I love you all.